How about we all come together and say, let's stop murders? How about we all come together and say, let's stop rape? How about we all come together and say, let's stop attacking pedophiles? Stop attacking pedophiles. Stop attacking pedophiles. Stop attacking pedophiles.
How about new, you crazy Dutch bastard?
Andy Dick. I do not do this. Look at
Oh, I'm Tom Green. You call, tell him I have a meeting.
I'm Andy Dick. I'm Andy Dick, and I have a meeting. Oh, look how funny I am. Oh, look how funny I am.
Oh, I'm Tom Green. Look, I'm falling out of the gas. My bum is on your desk. 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 I'm Andy Dick. I'm Tom Green. I'm Andy. I'm Green. I'm Andy Dick. I'm Green. Hey, I'm Tom Green. My bum is on the tree. The tree. My bum is on the tree. The tree. My bum is on the tree. Andy! Tom!
Guys, we have a meeting right now.
Of those men have very extensive ties to sexual blackmail.
Roy Cohn does.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Understand how the sexual blackmail thing works?
He's a good friend of mine. He's a good guy.
Ain't it a bit?
I happen to know some United States senators. One who is on the other side. I've seen that person in very bad situations. Okay? I've seen that person in very, very bad situations. Somewhat compromising.
Quiet on the set.
Roll sound.
Action.
Stay like green can. Wide curb can 8. Fade up music.
Yes! Bravo!
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Now, what does elemental have to do with cryptocurrency? I'll show you. So this character is named Amber Lumens. Okay? And this character is named Wade Ripple. What does that matter, right? Well, the names of the two tokens that's going to be running this new financial system is called Ripple, XRP, and Stellar Lumens. Coincidence? They're showing you how these tokens are going to work in an ecosystem running the new financial system. Now, XRP is for institutions. Cross-border payments in real time, money's going to move at the speed of light. Now, when you send a wire or send, or get a refund or something, it takes days. You have to wait for transactions to settle. This is in real time. It's transparent and happens within seconds. Instead of a wire happening in 2 to 5 days, if it's international, it's 2 to 5 seconds. This one, XLM, Stellar, is for the retail investors, for you and I, on how we can interact with these protocols when it comes to, if you go to Walmart, Amazon, any of these entities, they will be using that. So, and Stellar, they actually have a deal with IBM. They have XRP has a deal with Western Union. Even AVAX, which is another token, they have a partnership with Amazon, which most people don't know. So all these things that, they put in front of your face, oh, it's a cute little movie, oh, I have cute little characters, they're telling you where the money is. And since then, this has gone, these two tokens alone have gone up hundreds of percents.
Israel was created as the instrument to bring about the Battle of Armageddon and the fulfillment of prophecy, a war that will be so terrible, where nuclear weapons will be used, so that the American citizens and the other people in the world will get down on their knees and beg for no more war. And what is the answer to that? They're going to be told the only way we can guarantee no more war is if we destroy the sovereignty of nations and we come together as one humanity in a one world government. Right. Now I'm telling you, unless the American people wake up and stop it, starting in about 1996, the Battle of Armageddon will become a reality. Babylon is in Iraq. Read the book of Revelations. Whether you believe in the book or not, read it, because the people who are bringing this about are using it as their script.
Well, the UN did indeed charter Israel as a sovereign nation. They were the ones who created this state.
That's correct. It was really created by Great Britain and the United States, with the United States being the major instigator.
You made the right decision. I am sure you will be happy here.
For $85,000, we better be.
Is this a joke? It's $10,000 less than our asking price.
I think it's a great offer. We should take it.
Anything less than $2.5 million is unacceptable.
You should leave. Get out of our house now.
This is a day in my life as a perfect husband. I wake up to my wife's alarm and I put it on snooze for her. I'll do this repeatedly until she's ready to start her day. I then make my bride her coffee, exactly how she likes it. I deliver it to her and help her swipe on her phone for the next 20 minutes, while also stopping the kids from bothering her. At 8 a.m., I open her credit card bill and I don't look at it. Next, I spend 30 minutes breaking down her Amazon boxes. I then need to relieve myself, which I do without my phone in promptly 45 seconds. At 9 a.m., I jet off to work. During a career-defining presentation, my wife calls. I immediately put the meeting on hold to chit-chat with my wife about the dream she had last night. I, of course, apologize for my part in it. I then return home from my 10-hour day and immediately start in on my honey-do list. completely completing every single project I start. I do this while continuing to stay present with the family. At 6 p.m., my wife tells me the most frustrating part of her day. I empathize without giving any solutions, even if it seems really simple. 6:30 p.m., more Amazon boxes. At 7 p.m., I refill all my wife's water bottles and scatter them throughout the house for her. I then give my wife a back rub with zero expectations. We then pick a movie for her to fall asleep to. I explain the plot and the characters of the movie to her until she's finally asleep. I then stand watch outside her door to make sure that no kids mess with her beauty sleep, as if there's any way she could be more beautiful.
Consecutive year, Nick, JetBlue Airlines ranked first for satisfaction among all North American airlines. But you know what ranked least in satisfaction? 9/11 Airlines. What a terrible name for an airline. It reminds me of that tragedy. Oh, 9/11. Yeah, don't laugh at 9/11 again. I tried to tell him not to laugh. Adam. I know. I walked through blood and bones in the streets of Manhattan trying to find my brother.
Jesus.
Yeah, he was in northern Canada. Do you know that you are a cis male? Have you ever heard of that term?
A cis male?
Cis male. CYSMALE. So what it means is that you are a man. You're born a man.
Well, as far as you know.
As far as I know. And you identify yourself as a man.
Yes.
That's a cis male.
Now, I don't understand. Where does that... Is this a new phrase?
Yes, it's a way of marginalizing a normal person.
How bizarre. How bizarre. How bizarre. Destination unknown as we're pulling for some gas. Officially placed a poster reveals a smile from the pack. Elephants and acrobats, lion, snakes, monkey. Billy speaks righteous, Sister Cena says funky. How bizarre. How bizarre. How bizarre.
Ooh, baby. Ooh, baby. It's making me crazy. It's making me crazy. Every time I look around. Every time I look around.
Every time I look around.
Every time I look around. It's in my face.
Ringmaster stiffs up, says the elephant stiff down.
Welcome to the Independent Review, a weekly podcast where we bring you the latest from the world of independent journalism.
Stand by. Stand.
I want to do this next number with my old buddy Dan Connor. Let's see if we can get him up here. Dan, come on.
God, I hope he makes it through this. Yeah, well, don't worry about it, Jackie. He'll be great.
Come on, baby,
the same old place, sweet home Chicago. Now come on, baby, don't you want to go? I said, come on, baby, don't you want to go? Well, to the same old place, sweet home Chicago. Well, one is two, 6 and 2 is 8. Don't roll, baby, down on the big honey. Baby, don't you want to go back to the same old place, sweet home Chicago? Come on, baby, don't you want to go? I said, come on, baby, don't you want to go back to the same old place, sweet home Chicago? Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is a distinct pleasure of the management to present to you the evening star attraction. Here they are, back after their exclusive 3-year tour of Europe, Scandinavia, and the subcontinent. Won't you welcome from Calumet City, Illinois, the show band of Joliet Jake and Elwood Blues, the Blues Brothers.
One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
We're so glad to see so many of you lovely people here tonight. We would especially like to welcome all the representatives of Illinois' law enforcement community who have chosen to join us here in the Palace Hotel Ballroom at this time. We certainly hope you all enjoy the show. And remember, people, that no matter who you are and what you do to live, thrive, and survive, there's still some things that make us all the same. You, me, them, everybody. Everybody.
Everybody needs somebody. Everybody needs somebody to love. Someone to love.
Someone to love.
Sweetheart to miss.
Sweetheart to miss.
Sugar to kiss.
Sugar to kiss.
I need you. I need you. I need you. In the morning. When my soul's on fire. Sometimes I feel a little sad inside. When my baby mistreats me. I'll never find a place behind than you.
That was for Wilson Pickett. This is dedicated to the late great Magic Sam. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Come on, oh baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, oh baby, don't you wanna go? Back to that same old place, sweet home, Chicago. 6 and 3 is 9, 9 and 9 is 18. Look there, brother, baby, and I'll see what I see. Back to that same old place, sweet home, Chicago. Well, come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Back to that same old place, sweet home, Chicago.
God, the mafia's after
You
us
guys
now.
were hot. You were great, insane. I've got to record you.
Bullshit.
Bullshit? I don't bullshit. I'm president of Clarion Records, the largest recording company on the Eastern Seaboard.
So what?
Here's $10,000 in advance on your first recording session. Is it a deal?
Yeah, sure it's a deal. Yeah, sure it's a deal. Listen, all these cops out here, they're sort of waiting for us. We gotta get out of here without nobody seeing us. You know a back door out of this place?
Sure. I used to be head bouncer here back in the 70s. There's an electrical service duct right behind your drummer's riser.
Listen, do us a favor. Take $1,400 and give it to Ray's Music Exchange in Calumet City. Give the rest to the band.
You got it.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
You know, we're gonna make a break for you and the band keep playing.
Welcome to the Independent Review. Live on AM Wake Up on Odyssey, Rumble, and on the Indie News Network on Twitter. Let's take a look at this first clip from Dave DeCamp of antiwarnews.com.
Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is Anti-War News for Thursday, October 2nd, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Israel to treat Gaza City civilians as terrorists. So Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz on Wednesday issued a threat to Palestinian civilians in famine-stricken Gaza City, warning that they have their last opportunity to leave the besieged city and that they will be treated as terrorists if they remain. Katz said this in a post on X. He said that the IDF has almost entirely encircled Gaza City. He said, quote, "This is the last opportunity for Gaza residents who wish to do so now to move south and leave Hamas terrorists isolated in Gaza City itself, facing the IDF's ongoing operations at full force. Those who remain will be considered terrorists and terror supporters," end quote. So as we've been covering, Israel's goals for Gaza City involve cleansing it of its Palestinian population and destroying it completely, razing every building to the ground. And the IDF has claimed that more than 780,000 civilians have already fled the city. Other estimates put the number around 400,000. So not clear exactly how many have actually fled. And the estimate before the offensive started in early August was that there was more than 1 million Palestinian civilians in Gaza City. So either way, whether it's 400,000, 700,000 who have left, hundreds of thousands of civilians remain in Gaza City. And many of them are not going to leave for a few reasons. One of them is that a lot of them are malnourished and sick and just cannot handle another displacement. It could be a death sentence for them. There's also the fact that they're still bombing central and southern Gaza. Just yesterday, I covered that they bombed a tent in Al-Mawasi, the camp that they're telling them all to flee to. They're actually bombing that same camp, and they killed a family of people who just had left Gaza City earlier this month. So it's, civilians are going to stay, and a lot of them are going to remain. And Katz is basically saying, well, we're going to exterminate everybody, all of you. And among the civilians who are staying are the Christians, the small remnant Christian population that remains in Gaza. The estimate is that there's about 600 Christians in Gaza, most of them based at the two churches, the Holy Family Catholic Church and the St. Porphyrius Orthodox Church, where they've been sheltering. And the priests and the nuns who are at these churches have said that they're not going to leave because the people sheltering there, they're sick and elderly and disabled people, and they need their help. Some of them are Muslims. I know when Israel bombed the St. Porphyrius Church back in October 2023, right at the beginning of this, they killed Muslims and Christians. So this is, these people are staying, and they're not going to go. And again, this is such a small Christian community that if they're forced out and they, destroy the churches or wipe out this community, then that's it for the Christians in Gaza. And so this is, this goes on. And as I said, we'll get more into this in the story about kind of the daily violence in Gaza, but just heavy attacks continue in central and southern Gaza. So there's just no reason for these people to believe that they would be any safer if they moved to the south. You see this picture here is from Wednesday of Palestinians on the road fleeing the north. All right, so the next one here, Gaza flotilla updates, IDF boards boats. So this is from Al Jazeera again, doing the live updates. So the flotilla boats have begun to be boarded by the IDF forces near Gaza as they get closer to Gaza. And the Israeli Foreign Ministry put out a video of Greta Thunberg. They have like kind of an obsession with her. She was on one of the first boats that was captured. And so some of the boats have been boarded, and others are, as I understand it right now, I'm recording this around 11 p.m. on the East Coast here in the U.S. And let's see what some of the latest live updates are. But these are there's a lot of protests around the world in response to Israel stopping this attempt to bring aid to the starving Palestinians in Gaza. Israeli forces say that have detained more than 200 people in the flotilla from 37 countries. That's according to the spokesman for the Global Sumud Flotilla. And there was about 500 people on all the different boats. So they haven't gotten everybody yet. Some of them are still headed toward Gaza as recording this. So we'll see, and I'll write something on it tomorrow. But I just wanted to leave the live updates because this story is gonna develop and change throughout the night. Sorry if I'm just scrolling through here. So the Global Sumud Flotilla, this was about an hour ago, reports that 13 vessels have been intercepted and that 30 are still en route to reach the coast of the war-torn territory of Gaza with aid for starving Palestinians. The group said, quote, "The illegal interceptions won't deter us. We continue on our mission to break the siege and open a humanitarian corridor," end quote. So again, we'll cover this tomorrow. All right, so the next one here, Israeli forces kill 73 more Palestinians in Gaza. So Israeli forces killed at least 73 Palestinians in Gaza on Wednesday, medical sources told Al Jazeera, as relentless U.S.-backed Israeli attacks continued despite the talk of a potential ceasefire deal. The majority of the people killed on Wednesday died in Gaza City as the IDF continues its campaign that aims, as I mentioned, to cleanse the city and destroy it. The Associated Press reported that 2 Israeli strikes hit a school sheltering displaced Palestinians in Gaza City, killing at least 7 people, including first responders. It looked like it was one of their double tap strikes that kills rescue workers. 5 Palestinians were also killed when they were targeted by an Israeli strike while gathered around a water tank. That's just a very small sample of the violence that happened in Gaza City on Wednesday. And this picture is actually from central Gaza, this bombing. There was a strike on a tent on the hospital grounds that killed 1 person in central Gaza. Let's see what else. Another shelling in central Gaza killed at least 4 people, including 2 children. And the health ministry reported that there are 2 more starvation deaths due to the Israeli siege, the famine caused by the Israeli siege. So Palestinians continue to starve to death. And I think it's safe to say that the health ministry's malnutrition death numbers are certainly an undercount. We'll actually get more into that in the next one. But the daily horror goes on despite this talk of this ceasefire deal, this proposal that the U.S. and Israel presented. The update on that is basically Hamas is going over it, and the reports are saying that they want clarifications on and some stronger guarantees on certain things, and Qatar has said that some things still need to be negotiated since Israel made all those changes. And the question is, if they try to negotiate any of those points, are Netanyahu and Trump just going to say, oh, that's it, no deal then? We'll see. All right, so the next one here, U.S. doctors who worked in Gaza to Trump cut off aid to Israel. So a group of 152 American healthcare workers who have volunteered in Gaza signed an open letter to President Trump calling on him to cut off all military and diplomatic support for Israel's genocidal campaign against the Palestinian population of the besieged territory. So just a warning, this story, some of the details that they share about their time in Gaza is rough. I mean, these are the witnesses from America. They haven't let international journalists in, and the Americans that have gone over there, this is what they see. And the picture here in this story is rough as well, of some children who were killed earlier back in September. So many of the healthcare workers who signed the letter have served in other conflict zones around the world, but they said that the scale of violence directed at Gaza civilians is unlike anything they have ever seen. They described in the letter the atrocities they witnessed, including the massive violence inflicted on children. So this is from the letter, quote, half of Gaza's population is children, and we routinely treated them for every possible type of injury, 100% total body surface area burns, dismemberment, gunshots to the head and chest, evisceration, decapitation. We have even seen these injuries in fetuses whose mothers' bodies could not protect their unborn children from the American-made bombs dropped on them by Israeli forces. Most of us saw preteen children shot in the head or chest on a regular basis, often multiple times per day. Today, we beg you to hear the cries of Gaza's children that our consciences will not let us forget. We cannot fathom why our government continues arming Israel while its armed forces kill children en masse. End quote. The letter says that the healthcare workers who have been in Gaza since the establishment of the U.S.-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation have treated many Palestinians attacked by Israeli forces while attempting to get food. Excuse me, sorry. So the letter says, quote, whenever any GHF site opens, the day's events are entirely predictable. Within 1 hour, the nearest hospitals will be flooded with hundreds of wounded aid seekers. Each one of these mass casualty events instantly overwhelmed the already massively overcrowded and under-resourced facilities. Many patients are dead on arrival or have injuries that are beyond the capabilities of Gaza's healthcare system. End quote. The healthcare workers called the GHF a humanitarian abomination and said that it was a uniquely cruel tool of coercion. The letter also details the widespread disease and malnutrition in Gaza. It says, quote, today, virtually everyone in Gaza is visibly malnourished. We watched our own colleagues lose consciousness at work from malnutrition and dehydration, eating virtually nothing as they gave all available sustenance to their children, end quote. The letter also warns that the number of malnutrition deaths released by the Gaza Health Ministry is likely a huge undercount, noting that the number of starvation cases reported by the medical system in a humanitarian crisis is usually less than 10% of the true number of deaths caused by starvation. So that's less than 10% of the real number is what they're saying is the typical case for a humanitarian crisis, what's being reported in medical facilities. So the healthcare workers also addressed Israel's systematic destruction of hospitals in Gaza and attacks on healthcare workers, and they rejected the IDF's justification for the campaign against medical infrastructure. The letter says, quote, the 152 signatories to this letter spent more than 460 weeks inside Gaza's hospitals and clinics. We wish to be clear, not once did any of us see any type of Palestinian militant activity in any of Gaza's hospitals or other healthcare facilities. We urge you to see that Israel has systematically devastated Gaza's entire healthcare system and targeted our colleagues for torture, disappearance, and murder on an unprecedented scale, not because it was militarily necessary, but in order to destroy the system's abilities to save lives, end quote. The healthcare workers concluded the letter by calling for all restrictions on aid and medical supplies entering Gaza to be lifted, and with another appeal for Trump to end support for Israel. The letter says, quote, every day that we continue supplying weapons and munitions to Israel is another day that men and women are shredded by our bombs and children are murdered with our bullets. Another day that children starve in their helpless mother's arms. President Trump, we urge you, end this madness now, end quote. And I really think I've said this before, like the testimony of doctors, and not just the Western or American doctors, but the testimony of what we've heard from doctors and healthcare workers in Gaza, the things that they see, the pictures and the videos that come out of the hospitals. I mean, it's going to be the best evidence in the future of, when people look back and say, oh, yeah, it was very clear what was happening in Gaza. You don't shoot toddlers in the head on a regular basis. You don't shoot toddlers in the heart. It's on accident. You don't kill people trying to get food every single day, unless you think they're, animals not worthy of basic, necessities to live. It's just, it's just so the atrocities are just so horrible. And shout out to Dr. Feroz Sidwa, who I interviewed once before. About his time in Gaza. He was the one who led this letter. This is their third letter, that open letter that they've released, and they usually get a lot of media coverage, but so far it just goes on. All right, so the next one here, Trump gives security guarantee to Qatar. So this is an interesting story here. President Trump has signed an executive order pledging to provide Qatar with a security guarantee similar to NATO's Article 5. A step that came after Israel bombed the country, which is a major regional ally of the U.S. and hosts about 10,000 troops. Trump's order says that the U.S. shall, quote, regard any armed attack on the territory, sovereignty, or critical infrastructure of the state of Qatar as a threat to the peace and security of the United States. The U.S. shall take all lawful and appropriate measures, including diplomatic, economic, and, if necessary, military, to defend the interests of the United States and of the state of Qatar to restore peace and stability, end quote. The order marks the first time an Arab country is receiving such a strong security guarantee from the U.S., something that Saudi Arabia has long sought. And Axios had a quote from a former U.S. official that I thought was kind of funny. The official said, quote, Saudi Arabia thought that to get a defense pact with the United States, it would require normalizing relations with Israel. Qatar managed to get a partial defense pact with the United States by getting attacked by Israel, end quote. So according to the White House, the order was signed on Monday, September 29th, the same day that Trump hosted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and had him apologize to Qatar's Prime Minister for the strikes on Doha, which killed 6 people, including 5 low-level Hamas officials and 1 Qatari security officer. And this was a photo that the White House released of Netanyahu on the phone. Trump's got the phone in his lap, but Netanyahu has it. It's a corded phone, which you don't see too often these days. And then it looks like Netanyahu's reading off a script here. And I think, a lot of, I want to say like this whole kind of thing that Trump made Netanyahu do, obviously, they do want to preserve the relationship with Qatar, but I think some of this might be a response to what we've seen, like Tucker Carlson saying, like he said recently that Netanyahu's been going around telling people that he has the U.S. in his pocket, he has Trump in his pocket. I really do think Trump and his people are aware of like what Tucker and other people are saying. But anyway, and then the claim is the story is that the U.S. was not aware of the plan to bomb Qatar. According to Israeli officials, though, Netanyahu called Trump before the attack happened, and there was enough time to stop it, and he didn't stop it. But Trump's trying to make up for it with Qatar. And now, so this is seen as a response to the Israeli attack on Qatar. But I think this could also be an effort to shore up the alliance with Doha ahead of another potential war with Iran. During the 12-day war, Iran attacked the U.S.'s Al Udeid air base in Qatar in retaliation for the U.S. bombing of its nuclear facilities. And Iran gave the U.S. notice about the attack, and there were no casualties among U.S. or Qatari personnel. But in the event of another war, Iran's attacks could be more significant and likely come without warning. So they really want to kind of patch things up with Qatar if they're going to expect to be in some kind of war where they're actually really exchanging strikes with Iran, not some choreographed attack.
Next, we have this clip from Rachel Blevins and her interview with Patrick Henningsen.
Journalist, geopolitical analyst, host of the 21st Century Wire, and writer at patrickhenningsen.substack.com. Patrick, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
It's great to be with you, Rachel.
It's great to have you on the show. Now, I want to get your take on the latest here, as I know that Trump rolled out his 20-point peace plan for Gaza this week after a meeting at the White House with Netanyahu. And not only does it not end the genocide, but it would further Israel's control over Palestine, and it would give the Palestinians no rights, no justice, really, for everything that they have suffered through at the hands of Israel and the U.S. just in the last 2 years. Can you start out by telling me how you view this plan and kind of the timing of it, as Trump is now giving Hamas 4 days to respond?
I think we've seen this happen. We've seen this episode before, Rachel. So this is the new Trump, maybe not new anymore, but this is the Trump negotiation tactic. And the Trump negotiation tactic is the Israeli negotiation tactic, which is to create some kind of a proposal in absentia of the other party that you're supposedly negotiating with. In this case, it's the Palestinians and Hamas. So they don't have anything to do with this 20-point proposal at all. And then if the Palestinians or Hamas rejects it or doesn't comply with it, then that's taken as a vicious slight by Trump and the United States and by Israel. And then they say they'll go to the public. And by the way, Israel's been doing this for 30 years with Yasser Arafat, with the Oslo Accords. We gave them a perfectly good deal and they didn't accept it. This is the propaganda talking point that Israelis repeat ad nauseum. And Trump is doing the same thing. It's a perfectly good deal. It was a beautiful deal. It was a beautiful deal. But they don't want peace. And so they want to die. He'll give some vapid sort of speech. And then the bombing resumes. And then they'll say, well, we tried to negotiate peace. They don't want peace. Hamas won't, quote, release the hostages. And all they have to do is release the hostages and all this will end. That's a complete lie. Israel's not going to stop bombing if their remaining 56 or whatever hostages, many of whom are, if not all of them, IDF servicemen and reservists, if they're released, they're going to continue their scorched earth operation against the people of Gaza, against the native Palestinian population. In Israel, the political conversation is so far down the line on the sort of hard fascist right that they're saying, well, we're in the final mile now. We can't stop now. We've nearly exterminated and cleansed Gaza of these Palestinians, or what they call Arabs, what the Israelis like to call Arabs. And so that's the conversation in Israel. They think that they're just about to attain their ultimate goal, is not to get rid of Hamas, it's to get rid of the Palestinian population. They've already made Gaza unlivable. So what Trump has done with this, peace proposal, it's a complete joke. But there's a lot of key points in here that I think will point to where things are headed next. One of them is this proposal features Qatar. And Qatar has just been hit by the by Israel in an airstrike, trying to take out the Hamas, delegation. By the way, that's another thing. There's nobody left to negotiate with on the Palestinian side because Israel's killed everybody. They've targeted everybody. Those who have survived, they're currently under threat by either political assassination or even an airstrike, as the Israelis did in Doha. So they're saying if Hamas leaders leave Gaza, if they leave the Gaza Strip peacefully and pursue peaceful rhetoric, and there's all this language in there, and then we won't attack Qatar again. Qatar will be safe, and they're even putting these new sort of requirements on Qatar, these quid pro quos that didn't exist before. Now they say, well, we won't attack you if you do this, or if you take the Palestinians or the Hamas delegation, we won't attack you so long as they're espousing peace and cooperation and that they're working to disarm Hamas. Okay, if that doesn't happen, then of course it's fair game. Now there's also pressure on Egypt. The Egyptian population are at boiling point on this Gaza issue. So there's people in Egypt that would like to host Hamas they believe they can protect them in Egypt in a way that Doha can't, because it's a client state of the U.S. hosting these large military facilities in Qatar. And so Israel is now reading this opportunity and this, I think, where things are coming next, which is that the Israeli officials reported, and this was in the New York Times this past week, that I think it was an unnamed official or one of these typical statements that were concerned, security concerns about Hamas commanders slipping into the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, along with medical evacuees and people fleeing Gaza. So mixed amongst the Palestinians or Hamas in Egypt. And so what Israel's doing is setting up a narrative. Whether they'll act on it or not remains to be seen. But they're setting up a narrative that there will be Hamas enclaves in the Sinai in Egypt. Therefore, that gives Israel the, quote, right to defend itself, and they can attack or plan to do military special operations in Egypt to take out the terrorist threat. Okay, this is exactly what Israel did in 1978 with the PLO. They pushed them into Lebanon, they pushed them into Syria and Jordan, but specifically into Lebanon, used that as a pretext to invade, to attack, and to occupy South Lebanon for 20 plus years. So that's what we call the PLO South Lebanon trap, that Israel could very easily engineer the same thing in Egypt very easily. They don't even need to prove that it's true. They could just say, we have intelligence that's good enough for the United States, good enough for Europe. And then they could put pressure on Egypt. Why are you shielding Hamas? I mean, it's too easy to do. So that's where I think, and that gives Israel the opportunity to militarize the Sinai. What's Egypt going to do? If Israel attacks anything in Egypt or moves into the Sinai or whatever to create a buffer zone or has clashes with the Egyptians, what's Egypt going to do? They're not going to be able to do very much, quite frankly, unless they're willing to go to blows with Israel. Israel's a nuclear armed power now. So this isn't 1967. That's the difference. And so the U.S. isn't going to restrain Israel. That's been proven. So we're looking at potential repeat here of Arab-Israeli wars, whereby another front could open up with Israel. And so we'll see how that develops. But it is interesting because now the Gulf states, the Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and the UAE, I'll put off to the side as a special case. They now believe that their biggest existential threat or threat of aggression in the region is no longer Iran. It's Israel. That's a big change. That's a big change. So Jordan, the Kingdom of Jordan, falls into that category as well. Israel is threatening to push. They've already segregated the West Bank. They've partitioned the West Bank again, and they're going to annex the Jordan Valley. East Jerusalem is going to be cut off from the West Bank. And so you have potentially hundreds of thousands, if not more, Palestinians that could be pushed into Jordan, as many have in the past and from 1948 and the Nakba forward. And so what does that mean? That would mean regime change in Jordan, for sure. This would cause a huge uprising in Jordan. The King Abdullah is already on very tender ground. So, and then you have Lebanon. Tom Barak, Trump's special envoy, goes to Lebanon, openly canvassing for civil war, openly saying we're going to arm the Lebanese army to disarm, to fight Hezbollah. He's publicly saying it. So you have that plus the Syria situation, which is insane. I think Israel just did an airstrike on a residential neighborhood in Damascus, probably to take out, perhaps a Palestinian target or something or other. But so you look at all this stuff lining up, and nobody's going to restrain Israel. They'll continue to act with impunity in the region. And you could potentially draw in more state actors like Egypt, for instance. So this peace plan is a complete joke. If the Palestinians they're not that naive to trust Israel or Trump to sign anything after all of the bait and switches they pulled on them already. I just don't see them as seeing these as credible. So they only have one option, which is to buckle down and prepare for more pain. But the pain's coming anyway, even if they complied with this supposed peace plan that Trump has floated. It's really a Kushner-Netanyahu peace plan. It's all it is a ruse. This is a complete scam. It's obvious on its face. They're already drawing up plans to, redevelop Gaza. Smotrich himself told the Associated Press last week. He said the urban renewal is the hard part is the demolition. We've done the demolition. Now it's time for urban renewal in Gaza. We're ready for phase 2 now.
Next, we take a look at this clip from the This Rail podcast with host Nature Boy.
He's playing that very role.
Yeah, I mean, some of my friends on the left, the way they'd say it is that what's happening with Trump is what Obama did to us back then. He represented the things that he used, the words that a lot of us use, saying things that sounded like the types of reforms we wanted, and then came in and just double speaked it. And Trump's basically now doing the same thing, as the pendulum swinging back the other way. And if you look at, in terms of, let's just look at school choice. That's something that Charlotte warned about and discussed. When she was at the Department of Education, she was it was the president's sector on private initiatives, or president's task force on private sector initiatives. That's what it was. And that was where she basically said, it was like where they were discussing just the role of public-private partnerships, and not just the technology partnerships, but also, charter schools, funding charter schools with, which they're private companies subsidized by public tax dollars, and then use, the voucher program, which today they call them education savings accounts. They call them all scholarships. It's a lot of different names that basically they're just ways to funnel public tax dollars into private companies. Well, when Charlotte was there, basically she said, was public-private partnerships, merging of corporate state. Isn't that kind of like corporate fascism? And they all go like, "Oh, gee, Charlotte, we didn't think about it like that." And so they moved her to another office, and that was kind of the tenor of her stint there. Was that they put her one place, and then she stuck her nose in places that they didn't like, or asked questions that they didn't like, and they moved her around. So now, Trump 2.0, we're pushing education savings accounts and tax credited scholarships. We can call them neo vouchers for the sake of the rest of this conversation, so we don't have to get bogged down in too many terms here. But the thing that charges people, that motivates them to jump into school choice, is that it's being pitched as anti-woke or not woke.
Yeah, exactly. It's being pitched as the opposite of what it is. So that's a good segue. Let's get into your article.
Well, okay, go for it.
Yeah. I think that's a great segue, because that's a kind of what I really wanted to get into, because I found it fascinating in just the depths to what this conspiracy, if you will. I don't mean that in a conspiracy theory, but I mean a lot of people and a lot of corporations, all in private and the government, are all coming together to create this neo-technocratic fascist system that I've called for so much. So for the listeners out there, the article is titled "From Project 2025 to the PayPal Presidency: School Choice FinTech for a Blockchain Social Credit Economy." And as I was reading through it, and by the way, it's very information dense. My God, you get, like I said earlier, you definitely get down in the weeds. But as I'm going through it, what I'm seeing is this is kind of like the digitization of school funding, creating digital wallets, digital IDs that ties directly into the technocratic system we were talking about before. And it is used as a means of convenience, but ultimately, from what your article says, it's going to lead to a world of entrapment that is the likes of dystopian scientific novels. So I kind of like you to start off with this, and let's go talk about this great article, by the way.
Yeah. So the first, this piece is building on an article I wrote, I think in February earlier this year. It was Trump Ed 2025, and that's where I just laid out how the Trump administration would be moving forward with the school choice provisions that I just summarized in my previous response there. And as I was looking into that, I noticed that a lot of the Koch-backed, Koch brothers funded state policy network think tanks, such as the American Enterprise Institute, Cato Institute, Ed Choice, and the Heritage Foundation, those think tanks were not only behind or affiliated with several of the authors of the Department of Education chapter of Project 2025, but those think tanks are also promoting the use of digital wallets to distribute the school choice funds that are promoted in Project 2025. So those neo vouchers, the ESAs, and the tax credited scholarships. And then I also, as I was looking at some of these particular digital wallet companies, like two that are worth noting would be Odyssey and Merit International, just to give you one example. They're both funded by Andreessen Horowitz. Andreessen Horowitz being the venture capital arm of Mark Andreessen. Mark Andreessen being well, he was on the board of directors of eBay when it merged with PayPal, so he's not really PayPal mafia, but he's like in that orbit. And a lot in his portfolios, he has common investments with Thiel's founders, Peter Thiel's Founders Fund, and just his portfolio, like David Sachs's Craft Ventures and Peter Thiel's several of his ventures. They are all invested in a lot of the same companies. Some of them are digital wallet companies. Go ahead.
Okay, really quick. I kind of want to interject. So I mean, because this, I kind of to ask basic questions, some definitions. I could interject. You said Sachs. Who
David
is
Sachs.
David Sachs? Who is David Sachs? Because you mentioned him a lot in this article.
Yeah. So David Sachs, as I was thinking about a pun that I did one time for my.
You can say, man.
No,
It's dirty, but better. I don't care.
No, it's okay.
David Sass and abstracts and all that good stuff.
My wife was like, "How do you spell it?" I said SACHS, and I said no, SA. And I said Sachs, like something else. But anyway, it's like no, not Sachs like Goldman Sachs. It's Sachs like something else. So, anyways, so he's the White House AI and crypto czar.
Okay.
Okay, currently. So he's in charge of the Trump issues the executive orders, but he's authorized to oversee regulatory framework for stable coins that have been passed under the Genius Act. His background is so one of the PayPal mafia guys. He was back there early on. He also is a co-authored the diversity myth with Peter Thiel. And he was also an editor at the Stanford Review, where Peter Thiel was the founding editor. So the Stanford Review basically is like the premier conservative magazine at Stanford University, and it was founded there basically as like as a bulwark against the polemics of Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push Coalition. So in other words, right, before they didn't call it woke, they didn't call it DEI, but it was like, that's what it was. That was the diversity inclusion. That was the version of it at the time. So that was Peter Thiel and Sachs have been stoking the culture wars that have been, and those think tanks as well, but the culture wars that have created the emotional impetus for people to jump into school choice is they have Thiel and Sachs have had their hands not only in funding financial technology, but also this culture war stuff as well.
So in wrestling terms, in WWE terms, they're the heel fighting. No, they're the heroes fighting against the heel, the woke.
Yeah, it just depends on your perspective, though. Technically, you know what I mean.
Right.
I guess it depends on which. But yeah, I mean, if you voted for Trump, they are the baby faces defending the morals of America against the heels of the woke. I guess that's how you do that.
But they all get paid by the same boss. Same boss.
Well, and Thiel's I believe his Palantir is one of those companies that basically, I don't know if it's InQtel, but was started with venture capital monies that basically came out of the CIA or a CIA shell company.
It's all CIA money from InQtel, and it's amazing when you go into the history of all these big Silicon Valley companies, even smaller ones. They all seem to have InQtel in common. Isn't that it? Isn't that weird? Yeah. And then you have this little thing called Palantir, and
Well, yeah, and the rise of venture capital occurs almost in tandem with the closing of the Macy Cybernetics conferences. So if you think about that, right, what's venture capital for? It's for funding startups. It's for putting money into something that doesn't have a lot. You're kind of, it's a gamble in the sense that it's not something that has like a super guaranteed scalability, right? Marketability, right? It's something that maybe it's not a lot of, it requires a lot of educating the populace, and right, there's not a lot of demand for it, but it's something that could be very useful for other industries, for government. And so, right, you get this venture capital is like propping this thing up, hoping that it gets somewhere. Well, the reason I note the rise of venture capital shortly after the Macy Cybernetics conferences, because what did they figure out there? Well, they basically laid out the theoretical framework for ubiquitous cybernetics, that being the feedback loop mechanism, right? The process by where, and they basically showed that the human mind can be mapped in terms of feedback loops the same way a computer does.
What's a feedback loop?
So a feedback loop has to do with input, output, and then output, input, and the output becomes the input. So the best way to describe it is like when you're walking and as you walk towards a destination, there's a feedback loop, which each step being an output, getting you closer to the destination. Every time you do that output with that step, your brain then analyzes how much closer you've gotten to the target, and that's the input. Now, based on that input, right, that tells me I need however many steps left, right? And as I take each step, right, I'm getting the feedback that I'm one step closer, which means I have X steps less to take. It's that sort of, right? It's that data out is then analyzed by the systems that put it out in order to recalibrate the next output, right? And that's sort of right. So each sequential input is adjusted based on the output. This is why the term cybernetics, it's the Greek word kybernetes, which refers basically to it means steersman, but it has to do with the way that a steersman on a boat operates a rudder on a ship. And the rudder, you kind of have to feel out the waves, right? You kind of have to, you can't just, it's like a motorboat. You can't just cut through it. Like you have to work with, so the feedback is for each motion for each turn of the wheel, I have to then feel how's the water adjusted. And then the next thing I do is based on that. And so that's why they call cybernetics That's why they use that word for it. Yeah.
Now we have this clip from the Indie News Network with Indy and Reef.
General Rowdy Roddy Porter, he wasn't really rowdy, claimed that, quote, "We've got nothing to hide here. This is a legitimate government transactional business. That's because you weren't actively funding a known genocide at the time. DSEI is organized by the company Clarion Events, but, quote, "We've got nothing to hide here. This is a legitimate government transactional business. That's because you weren't actively funding a known genocide at the time. DSEI is organized by the company Clarion Events, but relies on close cooperation from the UK's Ministry of Defence, Foreign Office, and Trade Department. But I believe but relies on close cooperation from the UK's Ministry of Defence, Foreign Office, and Trade Department. But I believe it's also funded by Turkish billionaires, if I remember correctly. The Excel Center itself is owned by wealthy Turkish billionaires. Defense Secretary John Healey and Military Chief Richard Knighton are due to get
Nice.
There's no separation there. Both men were recently doorstepped by Declassified, meaning that they were chased down the street into whatever building they were in and questioned over their intelligence support for Israel, which might explain DSEI's decision to block access. Yeah, you think? Clarion story. All right. So that's another story that Declassified having an impact because they're now being barred and exposing the fact that the people that are asking the hard questions aren't allowed in the building anymore. And then we've got another guy who has gone through so much, and they our lives. They all pride themselves on being apparent, shining embodiments and benchmarks of journalistic integrity, transparency, truthfulness. That's what we were told all these years. But that very notion, of course, has collapsed completely. They were all proven deficient. We were let down. Still was independent. I mean, he had an outlet to report from, but what did he have? He had a phone and a camera, just like everybody else, while they were running for their lives. And this is one of the few at the Indie Media Awards website where I put a little bit more about who he is. And he's also founded another pro-Palestine Substack outlet, I believe. So, man, it's but yeah, the arms, the people in the UK are figuring out who these guys are and what they expose, and they're starting to wake people up, which is great network, and that'll pop something up on screen. We've got paypal.me/Indie News Network and our self-hosted website over at indienewsnow.com, and then over at our Substacks, and I publish the two of them pretty much daily or weekly. IndieMediaToday.com is where
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief.
Over at Substack, that kind of showcases who we found to be the most consistent and anti-Zionist and anti-imperialist outlets and live streamers and journalists over the last several years. And one of the first outlets we chose, and we, in the first class, was Declassified. One of the things that's happened as a result. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out. So go read this short article over at Declassified UK. All right. Britain trained Israeli soldiers fighting in Gaza. Declassifieduk.org is their website. And all of these links, by the way, will be in the Substack article that John says, last week I testified at the Gaza Tribunal about how Israeli soldiers have been training in Britain throughout the genocide. The Telegraph now reports that Israelis have been barred for training in the UK. So here's his testimony. It's 2.5 minutes long. I wanted to play this, and hopefully Reef can hear this.
I now want to turn to Israeli military officers training in Britain from the RCDS just last month. So even as recently as last month, the UK is training soldiers from an army that is actively committing genocide. And it's not just Israeli soldiers training in Britain. The UK government has welcomed several high-ranking Israeli officers to Britain since October 2023, often providing immunity, protecting him from arrest for war crimes. Then there was Major General Oded Basiuk, head of the Israeli military's Operations Directorate, who was overseeing Gaza operations as well. He attempted to secretly visit Britain in January 2025, but Declassified managed to doorstep him outside Russia in London. And most recently, there was Major General Toma Bar.
What symbolic, at least, that they're doing that. So shout out and, good on John for doing that and testifying and bringing light to all the times that Britain has willingly brought Israeli war criminals, known war criminals, for training in the UK. It's crazy. And then there's this other Gaza. They would literally walk up to weapons contractors and people that were kind of showcasing a certain weapon and ask, are these going to be used in Gaza? How many kids are you planning on killing with that? And they got thrown out pretty quickly. And all I can say was, how the hell did they get into it in the first place? But good on them for doing it and getting the footage. Wow. Just taking over. Just genocide airs everywhere. Exhibitors include Rafael, a missile manufacturer wholly owned by the Israeli state, and private weapons firm Elbit, we know them very well, which supplies 85% of the drones used in Gaza. It marks the first time then when Declassified was allowed to enter the SEI in 2021, event spokesman General Rowdy Roddy Porter, he wasn't really rowdy, claimed that, quote, "We've got nothing to hide here. This is a legitimate government transactional business. That's because you weren't actively funding a known genocide at the time." Sure.
Nice.
There's no separation there. Both men were recently doorstepped by Declassified, meaning that they were chased down the street into whatever building they were in and questioned over their intelligence support for Israel, which might explain DSEI's decision to block access. Yeah, you think? Clarion provided no questions aren't allowed in the building anymore. And then we've got another guy who has gone through so much. And they did an interview earlier this month. Hamza Yusuf writes for them and did an interview with Al Jazeera's Wael al-Dadu. So this was a sit down. He launched a scathing attack on the mainstream media's deficient and biased coverage of Israel's genocide in Gaza. On a visit to London yesterday, organized by Amnesty International, he spoke to Declassified about his experience of reporting from Gaza, where more than that's what we were told all these years. But that very notion, of course, has collapsed completely. They were all proven deficient. We were let down. They saw what's happening to us, the killing, the maiming, the wholesale destruction. This is a campaign of aggression of historic magnitude. They were running for their lives. And this is one of the few at the Indie Media Awards website where I put a little bit more about who he is and why he's here and why we honor him and the work that he's made, that he's done, and the sacrifice that he's made, and to tell the story. And he's also founded another pro-Palestine Substack outlet, I believe. So, man, it's but yeah, the arms, the people in the UK are figuring out who these guys are and what they expose, and they're starting to wake people up, which is great.
Now, we take a look at this clip from the Independent Media Alliance discussion.
we're going to be discussing the idea of the false binary.
What an illusion of choice does, it establishes the baseline assumptions that nobody questions.
This is part of the fifth generation warfare that we've talked about. Voting for the lesser of two evils is definitely an emotional, psychological trap that people are in.
You're cheerleading for an insane ideology because you think you're winning.
The role we have as media, how do we help everybody understand this is theater and you need to get back into the real world?
If you're opposed to the agenda, you should oppose it regardless of who's selling it to you.
Welcome back to the Independent Media Alliance. We're here to have a very in-depth conversation about the nuance of free speech today. Something that I'm very passionate about. Obviously, I think everyone here very passionate about. But even within this group, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I argue there's probably variances on where we think that should be. And that's the whole point of the conversation today. Obviously, this has become very, very relevant for a lot of different topics we could discuss throughout this conversation. For me, it's sort of like going back to the fire in a theater point, or even today with the idea of political violence being what I kind of argue is the new hate speech. You know, violence is a thing, speech, but it's the overlay to it, and where that line is drawn. Somebody making a joke about somebody doing something bad, or somebody saying that person should be hurt, and the words are violence overlap and all of that. So that's the main point of today. So let's get into it in general. And why don't we just start off? Well, I know in the past we wanted to briefly introduce each other. If you guys want to do that today, that's okay with me. If you guys want to say anything real quick, go ahead and go around.
Sure, I'm not shy. I'll jump in. Jason Burmis, independent journalist, free thinker, and I'll throw it to Bros.
Hey, everybody. Derek Bros here with the Conscious Resistance Network. Happy to be here for another IMA panel.
James Corbett, CorbettReport.com, and I'll throw it to Charlie.
Activistpost.com, macroaggressions.io.
I'm Les Claypool, and I play bass.
Happy 62nd birthday, Les. A little late.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Appreciate it.
Now, I actually don't know where the banner for our names are. Somebody point that out to me later, and I'll try to include that. But let's go ahead and start with, what I think is kind of the best starting point, which is the fire in a theater. And I'll kind of kick that off, and where I think for me, let me put it this way. I think this started with something that I already find to be a challenge on what the constitutional right is. The idea that it became this kind of line that was drawn, which opened the door, the shoe in the door of the conversation of that allowance, that words can be a problem in this circumstance, but then that becomes a nuance, right? And so I argue that no matter yelling, almost anything we should get into, but just saying fire in a theater could be an accident, could be deliberate. Maybe you actually thought it, either way, that other people are responsible for their actions. So let's get into that main point and what we think about that and the overlaps to it. Anybody want to jump in? Go ahead.
I'll jump in because I hate the fire in a crowded theater line so much. I have hated it since I first heard it when I was about 14. It is the most annoying thing I've ever heard on the internet. On the internet, it is the most annoying thing. Just think about what that means. It doesn't make any sense. It just throws open deliberate vagueness for anything to be classified as potentially offensive or potentially dangerous. There is no legal definition of fire. There is no legal definition of crowded. There is no legal definition of theater. What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. And it will be used a lot, and it is used a lot. They can just say Twitter is the public theater, and shouting fire is saying vaccines are dangerous and that kind of thing. It is deliberately vague to give people a tool they can use whenever they want to use it, and I hate it.
So I want to kind of throw in where my line is, okay? And I'm a free speech absolutist. Now, I think the question is, where does speech become either criminal, in other words, prosecutable, or you have the right to take physical action against that speech? And my argument is this: unless somebody is directly threatening your life or others around you, okay, with force right there, you don't have the right to take force against them. I would say that the one exception, if that person is an authority figure who is directing others to take force against you. In other words, the general that is saying you need to go raid that or take that from that person, and it is unjust. Otherwise, I'm sorry, words are not violence. You can say the most despicable thing about another person, about another entity. You can call for an organization to be burnt to the ground. You can literally say, I want this person dead. And if you are not directing people to do so, that may be abhorrent behavior. Okay. But to me, that does not cross the line. And quite frankly, has never really legally crossed the line. They have constantly tried to take this idea of speech, especially in a public forum, to incite violence and the causation so that they can criminalize that later. I think that is extremely dangerous. And obviously, what Kit just said about, there is no legal definition of what a theater is and can that be a public square, has constantly been exploited in the rhetoric, not just in the last, 10 to 15 years of cancel culture, but I would argue, you go back to the war of terror post 9/11 times, and you had the same thing. I'll give just one really quick example. Michael Reagan, who was Ronald Reagan's son, had a right-wing neocon talk show. I actually ended up having him on twice on this program for his work with veterans, I think on Memorial Day each year. He called for me and Corey and Dylan, the 3 Loose Change filmmakers, to be shot in front of a firing squad. That's his right. He had nobody that was going to come and shoot us. He had no way to get, us to be arrested or into a trial. We hadn't broken any laws. If he wants to be an ignorant jackass and expose himself, I'm all for it. I don't like people hiding their speech. I don't like the term dog whistle or innuendo. Say what you feel. That's what we're supposed to do. Let's get a real bend on who these people are and combat that type of speech with better speech. And that will end my intro rant.
Well, no, I mean, that's the whole point, is that you combat speech you don't like with more speech and better speech. You don't do it with a billy club or a bullet or any of that nonsense. In the last 5, maybe 7 years, the term stochastic terrorism has been floated over and over and over. And it's one of the most nonsensical phrases that has been injected into the Western lexicon in recent memory. If you're a violent person, you're going to do violent things. If you're a peaceful person, you're going to do peaceful things. Very rarely is speech going to be the thing that incites you to violent action. In most cases, it's violence being visited upon you first. And most people are reactionary. Most people don't wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to say the most insane, hateful crap I can come up with in order to provoke a reaction from people. There are bullies, sure, but 99 times out of 100, violence on the part of any individual is in reaction to what's been done. And so to claim, especially from the perspective of the state, that there are now phrases or words that we can't use because they may be violent, when in almost every case, the state itself is raining down violence upon people, is like literal violence, physical violence, whether it be bombs, bullets, whatever, limiting rights. It doesn't matter. The state is an inherent arbiter of violence, and they're the people that are trying to say, oh, well, maybe your words hurt, but our bullets are fine.
Whoever wants to jump in next.
I'll jump in.
Okay.
Go, Carrie.
Who wants to go? I just want
Carrie.
to add on to, it seems like there's a bit of a sentiment, which I totally agree with, that the speech is not really the root of the problem. So I think with so many issues, whether it's speech or drugs or anything that people want to ban, the root of the problem is not the item in question. It's not the speech. It's not the drugs. It's not the guns. It's a much deeper, I'd say, spiritual sickness, emotional sickness, and trying to cordon speech or anything else off under force, under, bans or whatever else, whatever government authority is invoked. It never really addresses the root problem. And I think the same is true of speech.
I'd like to get everyone, if you to kind of just, chime in on this unless you don't want to, but just so we kind of like set the table. Otherwise I can jump in again if you guys don't want to throw in your thoughts.
Going back to the fire in a theater analogy, does everyone know where that came from?
That's a good question.
Use of that?
I'm sure there's
the first
precedent.
use of that was a federal prosecutor by the name of Wirtz in the case against Eugene Debs for having the temerity, the absolute gall to make a speech suggesting people resist the military draft in World War I. And of course, Debs's defense is free speech. Of course, if we got a First Amendment, Congress shall make no law, right? And so the federal prosecutor said, yes, of course, there's the First Amendment and free speech. But what about if somebody is yelling fire in a crowded theater? That was the first ever use of that analogy. And it was then picked up by Oliver Wendell Holmes, who argued in the Schneck case in 1918, which was, again, prosecuting people for having the temerity to hand out flyers suggesting that they should resist the military draft in World War I. That, again, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's where that analogy comes from. And I think that explains exactly what that analogy has always been about and what it has always been aimed at, which is suppressing political dissent.
And James, as always, why you're such a welcome part of this team. And that's such a James Corbett addition to all that. I mean, that's fantastic overlap to understand that it comes from something that was not even about the actual threat, right? That's the real crux of that. But I have more thoughts, but go ahead. If anybody else wants to give their kind of overlay.
Well, no, just to build on James's point real quick. Sorry, Charlie, I'll throw it to you. But this is the sort of the justification for the Espionage Act that has limited the ability for journalists to report on real things that are happening in real time ever since 1918. Charlie, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, a place where these words are actually going to hurt us is in the designation of domestic terrorist. If you're using it to classify somebody like that, now we're talking about something totally different, where this level of speech in this current iteration post Patriot Act America, where Antifa is being labeled as a domestic terrorist organization. Now all of a sudden somebody starts going around calling you a domestic terrorist. That's a little bit more than just an insult. It might be a legal designation that could get you killed. So this is something that I think we need to take into account moving forward, that given the world that we live in, and of course the right is enthusiastically cheerleading the Antifa stuff without having the ability to comprehend 2 steps ahead that it'll be turned on them eventually at some point. But this is where the language and the words might actually be violence. You know how the left is always going on about words or violence and things like that. Well, if you get labeled a domestic terrorist operating in the homeland on the battlefield, that's more than just an insult. That might get you black bagged.
Well, I would just say this, though, Charlie. I refer to a lot of bad people as gangsters, which they are. I called, Joe Biden, Joey B, for years before he had dementia. And you could argue that if I'm calling them a gangster, then you could invoke a RICO case against them. Or, in the laws of the streets, he could be taken out by another quote unquote gangster. I would be just very careful about what regular citizens are trying to designate. Now, if you're a government official or you're somebody in power in that arena of law enforcement, and that can actually be taken against you, okay. But let me say this. I also think that you have the right in the society, even though it is overly used, to sue that person for defamation. If there's somebody in that public arena and that gains traction that you are, in fact, a quote unquote domestic terrorist, I would hope that you could get them on libel, the same way that they got, libel case for that 16-year-old kid in the MAGA hat who had a drum beat against him. And all of a sudden, everybody was calling that kid a white supremacist, right? So, listen, I hate the language. I hate the designate. I think it's totally and completely insane that you would label any group a domestic terrorist organization, especially one as quote unquote loosely affiliated as Antifa is. I was covering the anti-fascists back in 2008, 2009 at the G20 when it was the black bloc. And, back then, I didn't like people wearing masks. I still don't. It was one of the things that I thought was abhorrent in the whole COVID 1984 nightmare. I, again, feel like if you believe in your speech, you believe in your cause, let it show. Get out there. At the same time, you have the right to wear that mask. And until it crosses into the level of criminal behavior, trespass, destruction of property, etc., then it's not a crime. And by the way, those crimes are not terrorism, right? We have laws on the books. When I was in D.C. A few weeks ago to host that event, I went over to the George Washington Masonic Memorial because it had been somewhere that was really interesting to me. I'd been in the past. They had a big thing for Albert Pike in the corner. And I mentioned to the guy, I said, hey, what do you think about the Pike statue that was ripped down and Trump talking about it going back up? Now, I'm not for ripping down statues. I'm not for Albert Pike. At the same time, I don't think that those people that did that should be charged with terrorism. If you are going to charge them with something, destruction of property, etc., let's not make things bigger than they are. And that is another thing in this memeified culture that we are constantly there. It's not just dunking on people. It's how big and fantastical can you make everything? How can you exaggerate it? And when you do that, you end up exploiting the entire general populace under authoritarianism, under collectivism. And that's extremely dangerous, in my opinion.
It's such a good point, Jason. And Ryan and I have talked about this plenty when he comes in on Tuesday. There's almost always, if not always, existing laws on the books that address whatever issue is being thrown into the media sphere at any given point. So if the laws already exist, and you're now creating a new statute, you're now creating an additional portion to it, what you're doing effectively is sending a message to everybody else on the planet going, we have new ways to come after you because the ways that we traditionally used don't fit the narrative or don't fit the agenda that we're trying to push forward.
Now, I'd like to give Roy a chance to chime in on his thoughts and kind of the origin part of this. But if we could, I'd like to focus on like the principle, because we'll get mired in the examples, which I do want to get into, like all that, because we all probably have 15 examples and how it's overlapping with policy. But where we started, where it was about the like fire in a theater and like the principle of, again, like I said, the absolutist, in my opinion, being a free speech absolutist means there is literally no word or sentences you can say out loud that means that because you have absolute, your free speech can't be infringed. So where do the point we started with was fire in a theater. And if you wanted to, go ahead and chime in on maybe your thoughts on that basic premise. And I want to throw in some more thoughts.
Yeah, I get what you're saying with all the examples. And I think ultimately what we're dealing with here, and I know this example has been used to death, 1984. George Orwell. I reread it this summer. I watched the movie for the first time, but it's basically they're bringing in globally in each country the Ministry of Truth, thought police. And so, today it's Antifa. Tomorrow it's anti-Semitism. The next day it's going to be, the list is just going to get longer. And so hate speech is thought crime. And that's what they're doing. Essentially, they're legalizing these systems. Canada, Europe, UK, Mexico, you name it. And so I think that's really what's going on. And, when we were all kids, we didn't really have these problems, right? I was just thinking about this today. Maybe people should be allowed to be racist, right? But maybe there is that one exception of death threats. Who wants to be dealing with death threats? But I think ultimately what we're really dealing with here is the installation of the Ministry of Truth writ large.
Roy, you live in Mexico. All of your neighbors are racist. Hilariously, casually racist. It's okay.
So I'd like to throw in I'm glad we can. It sounds like most of us have a pretty similar standpoint. And if you feel that there is like even say like a death threat, Like, going beyond fire in a theater, I'd like to flesh that out too. Like, again, I argue that we should go as far back in the print, like to the principle, which is that there are no, like, and this is where I even argue a lot of Americans probably disagree. And that's why it'd be great to have somebody on that might even want to argue that like the Constitution is outdated and we should change it, which I disagree with. But that the argument is that if I say, go kill that person, it would be the person's responsibility who acted it out. But like Jason brought up an excellent point, from that all the way down to something that's more benign. The reality that how this got manipulated was the argument that the government should get involved. Because the point is, as he points out, there's a legal process through which you can sue somebody for doing like something like that. And it's always to the discretion of the judge. Now, it can be obviously overturned if it's a ridiculous ruling, but judges can quite literally rule pretty much any way they want at the end of the day. And they could argue fire a theater. You could argue as the theater owner, that guy said this and it destroyed my business. You'd probably win that. But the case is for the government to step in and say, you're not allowed to say that because that might do some harm. Like that's where, where that line I think needs to go back to. And so again, I think it's all speech. As absolutist or just what free speech means, I argue it should be every single possible variation of that. But so like a death threat, for example, like we could argue under the current legal reality, which I argue would be unconstitutional, therefore null and void per Marbury versus Madison, for example, 1803, like that if it's repugnant to the Constitution, it's null and void, whether or not it's been voted on by a bunch of unconstitutional politicians. But like that there's a line where a lot of Americans might say, well, you can't threaten my life. Like you can't act out on that. I want to get into like the sue part as well, but right on that, any more follow-up thoughts that anybody wants to add?
I'll throw something in there real quick. Because I know we're not talking about too much of the current event yet. It's mainly just the principle, but it does kind of tie into things going on with Pam Bondi coming out speaking about hate speech. I just wanted to mention that when she was talking about hate speech, which a bunch of people on the right, thankfully actually were calling out over on Twitter, on Elon's platform, she got a community note where people added some context and they linked to a Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court ruled that it is legal to justify or celebrate violence or to advocate or teach the duty, necessity, or propriety of violence, but not incitement to imminent violence, such as telling a mob with weapons to kill somebody. So even under what's constitutionally legally allowed, some level of calls for violence is considered constitutionally protected speech.
And that's interesting because at least if I'm not very versed in the case, but the argument sounds like you're there and saying, go get them, and they all run out and go do something. Now
that's the line right there. It says like, so if there's a mob of people with weapons and they're about to lynch somebody, you say, do it, then that's the line according to the Supreme Court.
That's a perfect example because so I'm going to be airing it very hard on the side of the principle, but like myself right now, I'm going, well, yeah, like you could make a legal argument that person would be involved with that violence. But see, this is where that line gets blurred. And so I argue today, even with something like that, because of the way the government is abusing these things, the only way to fight it is to err on the side of the principle, and then who committed violence will be charged for that violence. The crime.
This is why Charles Manson got put in prison, right? He didn't do any violence himself, but according to the state, he orchestrated, encouraged, and then provoked and ordered the violence. So that in and of itself should be viewed as a free speech case, as opposed to any sort of actual physical crime, murder, anything like that. It became a conspiracy to commit, and that's how the court system entraps other people. But it's a very, very fuzzy area. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that in particular, but that's the thing that popped into my head immediately.
Well, that's great.
It's a rabbit hole we don't necessarily need to go down right now, but the Charles Manson case was probably CIA all the way down to discredit the hippie anti-war movement anyway. So
right.
Next, we have this clip from Monica Perez.
Right. Okay.
And so in the case of Syria, from what I could see, the primary failure was two things. So first of all, the U.S. government was committed to destroy the country, and it would pay people far in excess of median GDP per capita to overthrow the government.
I want you and Jeremy Kuzmarov on the same show with me to talk about this book. Sure, would you do that?
Sure. I have to read his book, but yeah, sure.
The Anatomy. It's so great that he's really a good page turner like that, but it talks all about the outside stuff. And it's an excellent compliment to what you're doing because you're talking about the inside stuff, which is real. I always wonder that. I'm like, Was Assad a monster? Was he an idiot? Was he super corrupt? Was he more corrupt than the
Corruption
other
was the
guy?
primary issue, I would say.
Yeah, I
which
don't think
is-
he had people squishing machines in his basement, as was widely reported. I'm
No.
honestly like, why would he waste his time with that?
What kind of person would make up stories like these?
Yeah,
fantastical killing
white
machines?
helmets for sure. But anyway, so yes, so corruption. But I liked the way you point out in such a perfectly economic analysis of the function corruption served, and to disrupt. It's like taking out one of the mob families. You create wars because they're after the empty corners. Like, you can't just go in there and it has an impact because it is serving a function. So yeah, so I always wondered what it was that Assad was doing right, what he was doing wrong, separate from the outside pressures. And that's, I think, what you focus on. So tell me more.
Yeah, so the main problem is when you have regimes, at a certain point, the corruption becomes the foundation, where that almost just is your civic participation. It's bribing government officials. That is how you make clear what you want out of society. And once at a certain point, everybody knows the guy. And then you have this, it's very perverse. This is not what you want out of the world, but you just have it where everybody just sorts themselves on a sort of rational list of how much power is based on who you know. Everybody kind of already knows that. You know what the rules are, and you can just work within that framework.
But there is something to be said for being good at that, because if those guys were good at it, they know they have to keep it going. It's like a mob, you have to keep it going.
Yes. And then in the case of Syria, Bashar did a good job of shutting down corruption for everyone that was not in his immediate family.
Really?
Which is the worst possible. I mean, nobody's going to tolerate that.
Yeah. And it's not because they were like more competent, more trusted, contributing more. That's really a shame.
He had a brother-in-law, Rami Makhlouf, who he would just use the security services as his private army, threaten the worst combination, threatening foreign investors. That's, you might as well just scrap the whole project there.
Yeah. I mean, what you want is foreign investors. If you could get enough foreign investors, they'd probably stop trying to blow up your country.
Yes. And so then you can't, it's not a stable investment environment. You can't even deliver side payments to your people. Corruption is like the killer in these things. And in the case of, for example, South Korea, it was a military regime. Park Chung-hee had a cult of personality. He was like very hardline authoritarian. His people, and he was just giving basically payments to like the entire military. And he did his best to like stamp out internal military cliques. So what is called rich nation, strong army was the principle. And I think at one point, Park Chung-hee, he charged like every billionaire in South Korea with treason, and then suspended their death sentences just so he could have a standing reason to execute them if he ever just suspected them later.
I think that's what anti-corruption
at all.
But
as an anti-corruption measure,
for. That's what I think anti-corruption laws are for, and international ones too. Everybody's guilty, and come to me if you want to not get charged, and you can give me Trump bucks or whatever.
Yeah, but Bashar didn't really have it in him to, execute his brother-in-law. I think his cousin. Oh no, is it his mother's?
I thought it was his sister's, his wife's family. Sorry, I thought
it's really hard with Alawites because it's all they're not like literally incestuous, but they're extended kin networks. We'll just say.
Yes, understood. But she doesn't even look Syrian to me. I look Syrian. Doesn't she look kind of French or something? Anyway, it's hard for me to believe because she's kind of blonde and stuff. I'm like, she's actually Syrian, and he went to school in London. So I always wondered if.
A lot of Syrians are of like Hellene descent anyway. So.
Oh, what is that, Greek?
Yeah, they're like old Greek populations.
Right. Got it. Okay.
So you're gonna see plenty of blonde hair and blue eyes.
All right.
Like what was it? There's this Palestinian girl whose name I've unfortunately blanked on, but she got arrested at the age of like 14 for literally raising a fist at an Israeli soldier, and she had blonde hair and blue eyes, and Israelis were making a big deal because her guard was like an Ethiopian woman, and they were like, this girl has blonde hair and blue eyes, and her guard is Ethiopian, so who's the real native here? It's like, well, given that they're on the Eastern Mediterranean coast, actually, it's still the girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. She's still going to win.
Yeah, but Berbers. I was in Morocco, and there's the barbarians or whatever, Berbers. They came down, and there's a whole huge mountain population like that, too.
Yeah, that's a really interesting story because those were Visigoths who kept fighting the Byzantine Empire and kept getting they basically got themselves banished off the European continent. So these are like northern Germanic tribes who exiled to northern Africa.
I did not know that. Well, they kept it tight because they're up in those mountains, just I guess waiting for a breakthrough or something. they're not coming out and being Moroccan, but
there's
stunned
if you
by
ever read
their
a book
appearance.
called Who We Are and How We Got Here, or another one, The 10,000 Year Explosion, but there are plenty of other like interesting pockets like this. Like there are tribes in Afghanistan that are descended from Alexander the Great's men, because when Alexander was doing his conquest, he encouraged his generals to marry locals. That way, even if and when he did die, like his men would still establish like ruling dynasties all over like West Asia and the Middle East.
Oh my gosh, that's right up my alley. I'm eager to read that. So, all right, but they have these kind of kin networks there. So I guess, I mean, it perhaps was based on trust. And I think you point out that he himself was not born or bred to lead.
Right.
So his dad was training his kind of
older brother, Basil al-Assad,
who was a bit of a
bad person. It's the same with like Uday and Qusay Hussein. And again, another unfortunate pattern you see in these Ba'athist regimes where the father takes power, usually by just naked force, some kind of coup, and then their sons are just raised to be exactly the kind of people you never want coming within 1,000 miles of power. You know, Uday and Qusay Hussein would like kidnap women and rape them.
Right. Give them the Lamborghini for their 16th birthday, and I think it's over.
Yeah, exactly. Basil, I think, got to a car crash driving like 120 to the airport at 6 a.m, probably drunk. Who knows? And Bashar was in the UK. You know, he's Western educated, wants to be, I think, an ophthalmologist or an optometrist or some kind of eye something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he comes back and he's like, "Well, I already know what a good country is supposed to look like." Oh, and then he's made like the governor of Lebanon. So in the 1980s, Syria occupied Lebanon, or in part occupied Lebanon, since Israel was occupying the other half of it. And then Bashar al-Assad was occupying a country that was, I think, like even in the middle of a civil war, wealthier per capita than the country that he was actually from, which almost never happens historically. The only time you ever see something like that happen, frankly, is if a literal like barbarian tribe has won. Like if the Mongols are conquering China, where the occupying power is wealthier than the occupied state. But having Syria occupying Lebanon, and even it's half occupied by Syria, half occupied by Israel, and the people are still wealthier. So Bashar and there's something like seriously wrong with Syria.
I think my grandmother said that Lebanese were just like self-important Syrians. She felt that Lebanon was like part of Syria, and I think I ran into something that kind of validated that a little bit in your paper.
Well, I mean, because Lebanon was created to be, a Christian state, right? It was there because, Syria in its natural demography is going to be majority Sunni. I mean, what we consider to be...
She was Orthodox, my grandmother. She was whatever the Lebanese are.
Orthodox Christian. Yeah, so she was Orthodox Christian. But, what the word Syria means refers like sort of the whole thing. That would be Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan. These would all qualify as being part of Syria in some sense or another.
Okay.
And you have to really just lop off pieces of it to get places that are like not majority Sunni Arab. And you can do that. If you want to gut the country, you can absolutely do that. And that's kind of what the American plan is these days.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, we do. Isn't that what the Greater Middle East Project is?
Yeah. And so in Lebanon, the French wanted to carve off a Christian state, but let's just say Muslims have higher fertility. Well, two problems. One, Muslims have a higher fertility rate than Christians for reasons. And then second of all, like within, I think, 4 years of the state being created, you have this mass expulsion of Palestinian Muslims from Palestine into Lebanon.
Oh, yeah. So
that also totally screws up the demographic state.
Yes. Okay. So Assad was governor of Lebanon after his brother died, but while his father was still alive?
Yeah, exactly right. So his brother dies, I think, in 1999. Bashar is put in charge there until about...
He needs some experience.
Yes, that is his governing experience.
And he was just for a few years, you were about to say?
Yeah, just a few years. I think it was until...
Okay.
I'm hard blanking right now. I want to say 2006, but that sounds a little bit too late.
Yeah, it was not long. It is in your paper. So...
2005, June 2005.
Okay. All right. So he's there, and then he has to come back, and eventually Rule's father dies, and I would think he was better suited to it than the lunatic who crashed his car. But I don't know. I always wonder, is it possible? Would it have been, no matter what he did, could he have won? But what was his job and what did he feel like he had to do?
So he wanted to transition Syria. So Syria before this was basically a Warsaw Pact state. I mean, you're looking at institutions straight out of like, Polish People's Republic or communist Romania, real Ceausescu stuff just in the Middle East, well into the early 2000s that had never really been shifted away. Same secret police architecture or whatever. And so Assad said, we need to make that switch to what he calls a social market economy, which is a term he pulled from West Germany. So after America occupies the country, actually a lot of the Third Reich's economic laws stay in play because America is actually deliberately trying to hold back German economic recovery for the first 3 years of occupation. Everybody thinks about the... Exactly.
Did I tell you about this book? Nazi in Exile, Martin Bormann. He was like the basically CFO of Germany under the Nazis. And this is written by like a CIA guy. He said he went to Argentina and he had been saving all this money and disseminating it in like quote neutral countries, establishing corporations and everything. And that is why Germany was able to recover so quickly, is that he had kind of planted these little seeds everywhere. Yeah, it's a great book. I wouldn't order it online if you don't want to get a bunch of insane
I have some worse books. Don't worry about
it. So Germany had a leg up as opposed to Syria having being restrained. So it's not going to be good enough to follow their model because you're not going to have that base.
Yes. So between not being able to remove a lot of old party people, including your immediate relatives, any of your anti-corruption efforts in the countryside for normal people, those are just going to be unpopular unless there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So, for example, in China, it is well understood that when the party says we're going on an anti-corruption purge, there is a certain political character to it, but you do know that somebody in the CCP is about to lose their job, get arrested, possibly die. Right? Like nobody in China thinks like anytime the party's like anti-corruption purge, nobody's thinking to themselves like, oh man, that just means a little guy's going to get stepped on. They know like, wow, a big guy's going to get stepped on the TV. Like, I wonder what big guy they're getting this time.
I hope it's not me.
Yeah. But Assad could just not follow through on that. And his coalition was not interested in this. So Syria's ruling coalition was basically all of its minorities. Most Christians in the Middle East tend to have like hard communist sympathies. So yeah, that's true. I'm going to say that's true. I'm going to stick with that statement. Most socialist parties in the Middle East or nationalist parties in the Middle East are established by Christians. So when Assad says, I'm trying to pivot to, I'm going to pivot our entire economy towards modified liberalism where we're exporting consumer goods to the West. And are we getting the civil liberties out of that? No. Okay. So then we're not even getting the good parts of socialism as far as we're concerned, which is the guaranteed safety nets and stuff. And we're not even getting nationalism because we're apparently, subserving our economy to the West. So what's our buy-in here? And Assad's like a richer country. It's like, okay, we're getting a richer country. Does that mean that your cousin's going to stop, taking bribes and sending security? No. Okay. So then what are we doing here?
Yeah. What's the plan? So, they did, however, take some, separate from that, those basically would be impossible because of that. I wouldn't say that everything that they did well anyway. That wasn't the only thing. The corruption wasn't the only problem.
It wasn't the only, but I would say it was a leading. So in terms of hiring qualified people, Assad did that right. Entering the right trade deals,
yes,
he did that right. But if you can't court foreign investment, you can't really build that capital. Then you're missing out on sort of what is supposed to be the main engine of growth in these countries, which is the government, just gets these infusions of capital and just builds some really big factory of something to specialize in. So you're just waiting for the slow growth of the free market. The slow and steady wins the race there. And you're doing that in an environment of corruption and a poor investment criteria.
Which that actually can't work. The only good of the little, even just opening little businesses and stuff, it has to be super competitive or you're not going to have the really productive, successful businesses that you need. So corruption breeds subpar stuff That's the whole point of it. And on
like
every
Syria
level.
was not going to be in that environment. Syria is not going to be export competitive in anything, because again, in all these states, that's the other,
Right.
that's the check, that's the thing that you're measuring against. Because Hayek or Mises is a good. Well, those are two different things. I'm sorry, I
Yes.
forgot Mises
Okay.
fellow. So the Hayek has what's called the knowledge problem, and then there's a completely separate thing. It's called the calculation problem, and those are not the same thing.
Okay, I
That being said-
absolutely know. Okay, I think I know what both of them would be. Why don't you explain them?
So the knowledge problem is, how do you determine if you're making let's say you're making a train and you don't know whether to go through the mountain or around it, and going around the mountain uses more steel but fewer engineers, and going through it uses more engineers but less steel. How do you know which one you should do? Well, in a capitalist economy, it's the cheapest because it's measured in money. In a socialist economy, you make up prices, just out of the ether, so you don't know. So that's the knowledge problem. Then there's a second problem, which is, why are we even building a train? And you say, well, because people are going to use the train. Okay, how do you know they're going to use the train? Well, in a capitalist economy, because they're going to pay for it. They're going to, hopefully they'll spend more on the product than you spend making it, and then you'll profit.
Right.
So that's the calculation problem, which is separate
Right.
from the knowledge problem. Some people
Okay.
would say that they're the same thing, but as a good Misesian, I know that they're different.
Right.
things. I would
Okay.
never say that they're the same thing.
So how does this apply before I try to mangle that?
So the economic calculation that's at play. So without it, right, this is what Mises says: socialism is impossible, right? If there's no profit loss, there's no. So let's see, no ownership. I used to know this. No ownership, no trades, no markets, no prices, no profits loss, no profit loss, no calculation. And so this is why socialist calculation is impossible, and why there's always shortages of one thing and surpluses of another, and
Oh,
et cetera, et
absolutely.
cetera.
Yes.
And so in these kinds of countries, the profit loss, if the government is skewing prices on the back end, right, then where's the part where there's a rational calculation? And so they say the rational calculation is, can somebody who's not required by law to do so buy your product? So will somebody in America buy your car?
Now we take a look at the most recent episode of New World Next Week.
Welcome back to New World Next Week. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I'm James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. This is a comprehensive defensive agreement that encompasses all military means. We have got that story, plus continuation of the national emergency. But first, UK Prime Minister Starmer announces digital ID cards to curb illegal migration. They're going to stop the thing they started. New digital ID will be mandatory to work in the UK as part of plans to tackle illegal migration. Sir Keir Starmer said the new digital ID scheme would make it tougher to work in the UK illegally and offer countless benefits to citizens, while his senior minister Darren Jones said it could be the bedrock of the modern state. However, opposition parties argued the proposals wouldn't stop people crossing the channel in small boats. The Prime Minister set out his plans in a broader speech to a gathering of world leaders in which he said it had been too easy for people to work illegally in the UK because the center-left had been squeamish about saying things that were clearly true. Can you feel the Trump effect going all around the world? Addressing the Global Progressive Action Conference in London, attended by politicians including Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, all the Crown nations, Sir Keir said it was time to look ourselves in the mirror and recognize where we've allowed our parties to shy away from people's concerns. It's not compassionate left-wing politics to rely on labor that exploits foreign workers and undercuts foreign wages. The broken clock is very right this time of day. The simple fact is that every nation needs to have control over its borders. We do need to know who's in our country. In a conversation following his speech, Keir said he wanted the next election to be an open fight between Labour and Reform UK. In response to the Prime Minister's speech, Reform UK said the public was waking up to the fact Starmer's just continuing the Tory legacy of high taxes and mass immigration. Announcing his plans for the new digital IDs, Kier said the scheme would make it tougher to work illegally in this country, making our borders more secure. It will also offer ordinary citizens countless benefits, like being able to prove your identity to access key services swiftly, rather than hunting around for an old utility bill like a caveman. Another Labour Prime Minister, Sir Tony Blair, tried to introduce compulsory ID cards, but the idea was scrapped by Conservative Lib Dem coalition in 2010, so you know you're in good company. However, Sir Keir has recently said he believes the debate has moved on in the last 20 years, as we all carry a lot more digital ID now than we did. The new digital ID will be held on people's phones in a similar way to contactless payment cards or the NHS app. I mean, they can't give you the solution until you react to the problem they've created. And James, meanwhile, all around the developed world, as if in some sort of coordinated queue, Vietnam to delete 86 million unverified bank accounts that lack biometrics. Switzerland votes harder on identity cards for a second time. They voted correctly this time. EU to launch biometric entry-exit system for U.S. travelers starting October 12th. And jumping back to April of this year, France rolls out process to renew ID card and activate your digital ID simultaneously. Fantastic. And it's really, I mean, it's got me still thinking about digital Discord democracy that we've talked about recently. Australia's social media ban for teens praised at UN event. Governments and tech firms closely watching effort to block use of social media by those younger than 16, which I would say will cut down on a lot of the social contagions that we see. But James, which American administration, this is the question I was asking on my morning show this week, which American administration will have better cross-party platform adoption of digital ID? You think it'll be the Cokes or the Pepsis? If Hillary tried, or Kamala tried to roll out an ID, all the MAGAs would go, no. But what if Trump tries to roll it out? Will they all say, yeah, because it's to own all those Fujis? James?
Yes, maybe that is the way that they can bring people together across the aisle on this issue, right, James? But hey, yeah, it's to get those damn immigrants. And whatever, there's a way to appeal to this no matter what your voter base is. So the Cokes can always rely on the trendy hipsters to adopt the most trendy technology possible. Hey, you don't want to be like a caveman paying your bills with paper. Oh my God. Or there's the biosecurity scam that they can pull. Well, you need your vaccine ID, so you might as well have digital ID. Or, fill in the blank for the Coke side. For the Pepsi side, of course, it will be the immigration issue. Exactly as predicted. It's almost like you could just set your clock by it. So for people who don't remember, they can cast their mind back to episode 453 of the Corbett Report on Don't Worry, the border problem is about to be solved. Travel ban, in which, of course, I was making this exact point. They're going to point to the immigration crisis that they created and say, look at this crisis. The only way out is to give everyone a digital ID, and then we'll know. We don't need ICE agents on the street. We'll just be able to scan you from a distance. Yay. So that's the way it rolls. And anyway, we know where this is heading, and unfortunately, this is, of course, not just about the United States, as our related stories there prove. Of course, this is a coordinated rollout happening all around the world, all at the same time, just as another example of which I will point to another story that rolled out in the past 24 hours. Russia pilots state-linked digital ID through Max app. Yay, yes, Russia and China will save us from this technocratic dystopia. Oh, wait, they're pioneering the technocratic dystopia. Maybe not. So, yes, unfortunately, this is a coordinated, global, worldwide effort, and I'm unfortunately not going to be able to solve this problem here in the confines of this edition of New World Next Week, but I would humbly suggest that all of our attention, resources, and ingenuity should be being applied to this issue right now. Because in the very, very near future, we could be right in the maws of a digital ID dystopia, the likes of which Orwell and Huxley could barely dream of.
And I hang on to the hope that this won't happen in America. There's no way people will stand up, and there's no way people will go for this. They just might need a little catalyzing catastrophic event to kind of carrot and stick you along. This will be, I know we've said it a few times on these shows as we've been doing these shows for about a decade and a half. Game over, man. But this feels like a real kind of game over scenario. You see the videos in China of not being able to leave or enter any of your gated subdivision sectors unless you scan your face and the turnstiles open up. Cassie and I were talking about this the other day. It's one thing to have the old school subway turnstile styles that, I could hop over it and I snuck onto the train. You're not getting through the full length body. Not happening. So yeah, you won't be able to sneak onto a train, but when they roll those out to everywhere, you can't sneak into the grocery store anymore. Hopefully, actually, Brock, please put in some of those. I feel like I was watching a little bit of that recently. Just that it becomes a normal thing. All the little kids all line up to scan their faces to be let in again to their mind control school playgrounds. That's how we get going. On New World next week, 6:05. In a lot of ways, James, it's like there are no other stories. If this is the story, then we're screwed, and this is the thing we should maybe pay the most attention to. Oh, but wait, nuclear war. Saudi Arabia and nuclear-armed Pakistan sign mutual defense pact. Grabbing this from the Rothschild Reuters. Everything we say and play is always down in the show notes, as we always try and remind you, if you can't hand off these crazy conspiracy videos to your friends and family, please use the show notes. We work hard putting together notes that source and cite and document all the crazy things we talk about on these shows. Saudi Arabia and nuclear-armed Pakistan signed a mutual defense pact, significantly strengthening a decades-old security partnership a week after Israel's strikes on Qatar upended the diplomatic calculus in the region. The enhanced defense ties come at Gulf Arab states grow increasingly wary about the reliability of the United States as a security guarantor. There are a lot of kind of major changes going on this last year, James. Asked whether Pakistan would now be obliged to provide Saudi Arabia with a nuclear umbrella, a senior Saudi official told Reuters this is a comprehensive defensive agreement that will encompass all military means. Pakistan is, did they mention that they are nuclear armed, Muslim majority nation? And of course, if you've done your 9/11 truth research, you know that the US CIA helped set up their own ISI, their own Central Intelligence Agency. So usually probably working pretty closely together, even if maybe Pakistan doesn't know it. And also fields the Islamic world's largest army, which it has regularly said is focused on facing down neighboring foe India. The agreement was the culmination of years of discussions, the Saudi official said when asked about the timing of the deal. This is not a response to specific countries or specific events, but an institutionalization of long-standing and deep cooperation between our two countries. The agreement states that any aggression against either country shall be considered an aggression against both, a statement from the Pakistani Prime Minister's office said, echoing a R2P required to protect other nations' deals have been made. In related notes, the attack on Doha and the Saudi-Pakistan Defense Pact redefining security and alliances in the Middle East. And, just to make it a little more fun, Jared Kushner and Saudi Arabia to buy EA in a $55 billion deal. Saudi Arabia looking to diversify its investments outside of oil, which is why it is interested in acquiring Electronic Arts, EA, NWO. It's in the game, James.
Exactly right. And what a game it is at the moment, considering the tectonic moves that are taking place right now in the Middle East, including this deal, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia. So the Pakistan nuclear umbrella being extended to Saudi Arabia, at least potentially. I mean, that is a huge shift in power relations in the region. And it comes about, I hope people will follow the link from that related that we're throwing in there from the Neo Journal about the attack on Doha, because clearly something has fundamentally changed there with Israel striking in Doha. Wait, aren't they under the American umbrella? Isn't there supposed to be some sort of security protection? No, we're going to look the other way. Who cares? It was the Israelis. They can do whatever they want. Oh, is that how it works? Okay, well, then we better start signing our own agreements. And that's really what's happening right now. And it's a pretty big shift that is happening. So I hope people will follow through on that because, again, the implications of this going forward are quite huge. we're seeing fireworks all over the place right now. So I guess it's hard to keep your eye on all of them. But I'd say this is a particularly important one, with the specter of, all-out regional war becoming more and more at least plausible by the day. So we'll see. We'll see what eventuates from this. But I don't think that this is going to be a small story. I think this will point the way towards future relations in the Middle East.
And one more related about Netanyahu's. Man, Netanyahu was flying around America like he was Bush on the morning of 9/11. You didn't know where he was going to. Oh, it was to avoid arrest while he was flying to New York to, of course, scaremonger at the United Nations in downtown Manhattan. We will include that in your show notes as well. See, a lot happens when we miss just 1 week here in New World Next Week. And this is episode 605, our third and final segment, kind of a roundup segment, if you will. And unfortunately, it's like, Monsanto, they've ruined that word. I can't even use a funny cowboy roundup word without thinking of transgenic monstrosities. But speaking of Saudi Arabia, continuation of the national emergency with respect to certain terrorist attacks. A presidential document by the Executive Office of the President on September 3rd, 2025, federalregister.gov, consistent with Section 202D of the National Emergencies Act, 50 U.S. Code 1622. I am continuing for 1 year the national emergency previously declared on September 14th, 2001 in Proclamation 7463 with respect to the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 and the continuing and immediate threat of further attacks on the United States. Because the terrorist threat continues, the national emergency declared on September 14, 2001, and the powers and authorities adopted to deal with that emergency must continue in effect beyond September 14, 2025. Therefore, I am continuing in effect for an additional year the national emergency that was declared on September 14, 2001 with respect to the terrorist threat. This notice, repetitive as though it may sound, shall be published in the Federal Register and transmitted to Congress. James, they did it. They seem to do it. It was early. They went early on the renewal, and I could only find it in the Federal Register back when I was first giving you this story, and I was not able to find it on whitehouse.gov. I'm not sure if it has made it to whitehouse.gov, but I get a kick out of it. National emergency with respect to certain terrorist attacks, but not other certain attacks that we're certain that, they're probably behind. Furthermore, on this roundup segment of follow-ups, a follow-up from my ponderings on a recent New World Next episode. It was 602. Rabbits with tentacles tick all the boxes. It was a early Halloween episode. I was like, weren't there mosquitoes that they claimed would go in, infest the bad guys, mate with them, and then they wouldn't breed, and everybody dies, and everybody's happy, but it didn't work that way. And we kind of wondered, and we've run into that before. We've talked about a lot of things on New World Next Week. It's like, yeah, we probably talked about that. I wasn't able to find it in my files in the moment, but I have found it now. And it goes back to New World Next Week, episode 386, Schools Ditch Fondle Slabs for Paper Books, a good news cover story. It goes back to July of 2019, GM mosquitoes breeding in Brazil despite biotech firms' assurances to the contrary. An experimental trial to reduce the number of mosquitoes in a Brazilian town by releasing genetically modified mosquitoes has not gone as planned. Traces of the mutated insects have been detected in the natural populations of mosquitoes, which was never supposed to happen. The deliberate release of 450,000 transgenic mosquitoes in Brazil resulted in the unintended genetic contamination of the local population of mosquitoes, according to new research published in Scientific Reports. Going into the experimental trial, British biotech company Oxitec, good buddies with Dr. Billy, assured the public that this wouldn't happen. I would say the experiment is working much better on humans not being able to breed and reproduce for some reason. I guess they messed it up in the mosquitoes. And as long as we are following up, James, I play the audio of our New World Next Week episodes on Monarchy Radio. And so I heard our recent episode, I heard it once and then I heard it twice. And then the second time I heard it, I was like, hey, James said that the kids had to get Discord democracy, like we were talking about in Nepal a couple of weeks ago, because Generation X sat on their asses. I beg your pardon, sir. We marched in the aughts in Portland, Oregon, which you might hear in the news a little bit, against Obama's Afghanistan surge. Remember, he said it's the right war because that's who totally did 9/11. And we marched a couple of times to try and get, I know, dare us, transgenic monstrosities actually labeled so you can know and look at a food and see. So those are the times that we did march. Thank you very much. So 9/11 emergency, breeding skeeters and marching in the aughts, a mini New World Next Week segment right there, James.
Indeed. And each one of them is probably its own story. But speaking of marching in Portland and the specter of National Guard and all of that, it is interesting that, again, you don't have to have a crystal ball. You know what's coming. So I will point people back to my episode 411 on states of emergency, where I made the point that the governing paradigm of the planet at this moment is emergency and crisis. And of course, a few years ago, it was the biosecurity scamdemic emergency, which was the reason for repealing any and all pretense of rights that you may have. And now it's whatever. There's crime on the streets, so we'll just march the National Guard in or what have you. But it is absolutely still functioning that way. Declare an emergency, and don't worry, we're here to help. We're from the government, and we're here to clean it up for you guys. So that is exactly what this ongoing, never-ending, continuous 9/11 state of emergency that is redeclared every single year is about. It is announcing to the world, this is the governing paradigm. It is a never-ending emergency. Yes, you are still under emergency legislation from 24 years ago because the bearded, scary Muslim boogeymen came and got you. So you better give up all your rights. That is the paradigm we're under, and unfortunately, they just like to shove it in your face every single year. Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, Obama. I mean, Trump. Sorry, I got my puppets confused. But that's the point. Every single one of them, every single year, gives their rubber stamp to this ongoing, never-ending, continuous state of terror emergency. And you better be scared, guys. I hope you're scared enough to give up all your rights.
And you're echoing the statement that Ronald Reagan at least popularized. Whatever, the most dangerous words in the American English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Kind of seems like the Trumpers maybe have forgotten that phrase from the guy they, of course, love to exalt and think in some ways they are kind of echoing and trying to repeat that feeling of the 80s. James, I've got a picture of myself holding up an old issue, it was new at the time, holding up an issue of the Oregonian, the newspaper in Portland, Oregon, back when I used to do my weekly live Media Monarchy show on pirate radio broadcasts, and it says, Black helicopters over Portland? And that's going on almost 20 years ago. Again, a lot of this stuff doesn't exactly happen overnight. It might feel like it, but the groundwork has been laid for a long, long time. I'll try and find that picture. Maybe we can throw that in the show notes as well. Good thing, James, your new online open source education digital downloads are hot and selling like hotcakes because the Canada Post is on strike again. I just learned today. So take note, any folks that might affect. It will affect our ability to run NewWorldNextWeek.com and to get you Corbett Report and Media Monarchy shirts and gear and hats and discs and USBs and DJ sets and all of that helps support our work and keeps us fear-free and ad-free. And yes, I do play the exclusive audio of these New World Next Week episodes. Nobody's heard them but me and James and Brock. I premiere them on my morning show, after my morning show. That's about 10 a.m. Mountain Time on MediaMonarchy.com/listen. James, good to have you back, buddy.
It's good to be back doing this with you, James. Thank you again for these stories. And thank you to all the people out there who are supporting the work through NewWorldNextWeek.com and supporting at MediaMonarchy.com and CorbettReport.com. We appreciate you and your support, and we'll be back next week to do it all again.
Thanks so much, buddy. Take care.
Take care.
I just know we found something so wild of the ordinary. You got me kissing the ground of your sanctuary.
Just this show, but all of the other shows that air on the channels, which winds up being 16 a week, 65 a month, 25 different personalities. All of that comes to you for free.
What kind of a fucking ass clown wouldn't have the heart and compassion to donate to baby Steve?
Now, let's take a look at some highlights from AM Wake Up from this week. Make sure to support and share their show to keep this great channel going. Share the show. Share the show. Share the show.
Share the fucking show.
Here to discuss that and much more. Like I mentioned, she owns and operates Starcrow Astrology, which is fascinating. We'll pull the website up and stuff like that, and has a very interesting background. So with us on the show for the first time, Carrie Bird, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Steve. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, it's good to have you, and thank you for being on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're a major influence of mine, Steve. You were kind of my conspiracy shaman. You brought me over to the other side.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. What side were you on previously? Just, the narrative is what it is and that kind of stuff.
Narrative is what it is, but I knew the banks had the power, but I skewed a little shit lib for a while there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it happens. It happens. Especially if you're, in and a part of the communities that you have been for most of your adult life. It's just kind of, it's front and centered and in there. And it's just sort of taken as an assumption that you're going to fall onto varying degrees of the left.
Yes,
And
but
then
no more. Thank God.
have you been able to like find people that you can relate to on that level, like wherever you're at or within the communities that you're in? Have you seen like a similar shift take place?
Not really, no. But I do a lot of the astrology of the globalist agenda, and my students have shifted with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's encouraging. We were just talking about the sinister version of that with the Charlie Kirk and Turning Points USA thing.
I was listening. I'm following the Charlie Kirk thing really closely. I find a lot of hope in it, because you have so many people uniting around getting the truth out. I mean, Candace Owens is not going to stop talking about it. Max Blumenthal is not going to stop talking about it. So it kind of feels like we're finally going to get to perhaps the truth.
Yeah, although where Candace is concerned, she won't. The one thing she doesn't seem to have any interest in is looking at how just at ease and happy and smiling and joking Erica Kirk seems to be in the wake of her husband's assassination.
I don't really find that funny, or I don't find it odd. I was in my past life, I was a hospital chaplain. So I have been around death a lot and seen people react to death. And these are professional speakers. I don't know. I don't necessarily find it funny.
No, it's I find it very odd that she's cracking jokes and stuff like that. Like, I mean, and look, everybody does grieve differently. We don't know too much about her. We know some very weird disinformation has been put out. Like, she had nothing to do with the Romanian orphan thing. That's all nonsense. She was in an Emerson Drive video back in 2012, something like that. Been on a couple of reality shows. Defense contractor parents, summoned to become a model and beauty contestant. It is weird. Multimillionaire before she applied for a mid-level job at Turning Point USA.
Yeah, the Erica Kirk angle isn't really the one that I'm following. I find it incredibly hopeful that Charlie Kirk's base is so aware of the Israel angle, and they're woke to the shootings all being suspicious. All of the shootings are suspicious. So that's where I find a lot of hope in it.
Yeah, look, if you can turn that into it, we'll see what happens with Bilderberg freaking Wampelstein or whatever his name is, if there's a ground level rejection of the Charlie Kirk new version, and because there's a huge backlash online, but that doesn't necessarily carry over into real life, especially where people who aren't on Twitter all the time or whatever are concerned. And with TikTok being an entity that belongs to effectively U.S. intelligence now, and MI6 now, and the Mossad now, with TikTok fully in control there, I think you're going to see a huge shift in the tenor of conversation that's allowed there. I know there's been a bunch of people who have just yanked their accounts because they're like, okay, well, I'm going to get booted anyway, so I might as well try and find somewhere else to be. But if there's a rejection of that, if there's a mass exodus from what's obviously a narrative control operation in TikTok and X for that matter, to somewhere else where it's a little bit easier for people to communicate. I don't know where that is, to be perfectly honest. And a rejection of Bartleby Winklefine, then maybe, I would agree, like that's how you would have to do it. So if there's people on campuses, I don't know if there are, but if there's people on campuses that are sitting there at every event, putting this kid through the paces and being like, no, we're done with those talking points, you clown, let's get some actual, I don't know, individualists in the party of rugged individualism, and let's do this a little bit differently. I would 100% agree with you.
It's just going to be really interesting to see if that huge voting block that Charlie Kirk organized, it is like the biggest voting block in the country. They're not going to settle for burying the Epstein list. They're pissed about that. And they're pissed about, it's supposed to be America first. Why are we funding this genocide in Israel? I think that we could see a really big turning point come out of this.
Yeah, no, I agree. You had brought up Max Blumenthal, and he did, or at least as part of something that Gen X Girl on Twitter and published in The Last American Vagabond I put out, and it's about Israel's 8th Front War. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you'll indulge me for like 7 minutes, but this thing is very, very straightforward. And we're already talking about it. And then we can get into the North Carolina stuff and then whatever you want to do.
Great.
We're already kind of in the middle of it, and I might be a little high. So I'm determined to finish the point that I was trying to make at this, but it's something that Ryan Christian and I have in common a lot. Like, we'll get off track a lot. We're like, no, wait, I was going somewhere with it, I promise. Just let's do that, and then we can do the next thing. But yeah, this is interesting, and it's all stuff that we've talked about on the show. It's just whenever these are put into concise, easily digestible formats, I like to get them out there in case you guys want the link and you want to share it to people who really need to hear it.
Face is a political tsunami in the United States, and they have no way of holding it back. And that's why, in the wake of Kirk's death and in the days before his death, some of these Zionist money men have started a full-on takeover campaign of the U.S. media, which we can talk about. It's like a full court press in the United States. Netanyahu had been waging a 7th front war in the region, and now the United States has become the 8th front. And they want to prevent anyone from being able to express themselves anywhere in the digital online ecosystem by just buying it all.
And yet we see the effort to break down our bond in America in other parts.
I did forget to apologize for the hokey ass music that everybody's being subjected to, but they do. It's intercut with a lot of commentary, and so I'll try to like adjust volume as necessary. But yeah, I hate it when they do this. I don't. Do you know why? Do you know what the psychological reason behind putting? Is it just to hypnotize people and keep them there?
Yeah, it's to hypnotize people and keep them there.
I mean, I don't know. But yeah.
To the world, that partnership that promotes Judeo-Christian values, that protects in Israel Christians as nowhere else in the Middle East. That truth is being reversed, put on its head by a campaign of lies. Israel is now portrayed as the enemy of Christians. And the enemies of Christians are portrayed as the friends of the United States. So Israel, the guardian of Christianity in the Middle East.
That for all those churches we bombed.
Is presented on American television by purchased influencers. Presented as the enemy of Christianity. What folly, what lies, what a travesty of truth.
Elohim, love Israel. Praise God. God loves Israel. The God has loved this Pilato. It's all speak. No. Just know the name of Yeshua. Right?
Whoa.
You slap my face?
Wow.
You slap my face? Yeah, Jewish people. Jewish people, you're really breaking my heart.
So one of the things we have fought now, a 7-front war, we have an 8th front. And that is the front in the battle for truth. And I can think of no one who can carry this battle alongside with us. No one who can do it better than you on this channel, than you, Paula. And
this woman is.
And our many Christian friends who must fight for our common values, who must stand up for the truth. And by standing up for the truth, you stand up with Israel and you stand with the Jewish people against this abomination of falsehoods. We can win this war exactly as we win the 7-front war. And I thank you for your support.
Need to recognize that there is an 8th front in this war. It might not be a terrestrial border that you can find on a map, but this domain is as volatile, is as violent, and is as vital to our future. The information sphere, the infosphere, is the 8th front in this war. And seizing the high ground in the fight for global public opinion is is a battle that's as important to the long-term war as what you've done in Lebanon and Syria.
Worldwide problem. The people on the the extremes, the Islamists, the radical Islamists, and their union with the ultra progressives, they often speak about human rights. They speak about free speech, but they use violence to try to take down their enemies. parties, whether it's President Trump, who's been almost assassinated twice, or they try to kill me here too. But they got Charlie Kirk, and it's just heartbreaking.
Look, it's clear that the hardened anti-Zionists from the far left are the photo inverse of the white supremacists from the far right. I see these videos. I see these images of mass protesters breaking into buildings, barricading with furniture. And look, I'm reminded of January the 6th. That's what this looks like to me. I mean, we talk at ADL about right-wing extremists, about masked Proud Boys showing up at school board meetings, about Oath Keepers wearing masks. I look at this, and this is what I see.
Doing. But all these encampments at universities and all these things, that's promoted by far left movement or ideology. Far right ideology, when you mesh it with the far left, any level of crazy gets more crazy. It's just that the far right people, when they get fucking mad, then they're going to start fucking shit up.
Right. I mean, that's a fair point.
If you wouldn't tolerate it if someone's wearing a swastika on their arm, I'm sorry, you shouldn't tolerate it if they're wearing a keffiyeh.
Yeah.
And so what, reframe it. So Destiny versus Floyd House. Say it again.
Yeah. And who was worse for society, George Floyd or Destiny? And so Ben and I, through no choosing of our own, got the George Floyd side of this, and the ortho bros, from I imagine a moralistic standpoint, are going to argue that Destiny is worse for society. But the ortho bros in particular are big on let's go back to a monarchy, even a constitutional monarchy, but they want that one central figurehead that disseminates all wisdom and law. And so I would love to get into an extended conversation about that as an ideology, because I would absolutely destroy it and it would be fun for me. But see, I want to hear the arguments. You
that's
know
what I mean. If they're coming at this with good intention or just at least honesty, and they're making arguments they believe, and like I think it's important to keep it like not you're so fucking dumb. You know what I mean? Even though that feels easy to do with something. Because here's my thing. It's like why don't we just call it a constitutional dictatorship? It's like you can't fucking do that. Like I understand, like there was an overlap at a point in which there, where that shifted, where there was like a chart, like a Magna Carta, like a thing, like, well, look, these are the rights. We're still a monarchy, like sort of even you could pretend like with the, England and so on. But the reality is that's not really, it was a process of gruelingly forcing that power structure to acknowledge those things. When it first started, they could still just be like, fuck you, you're going to jail anyway. I'm in charge. I'm a dictator. So fuck off. It's like if it really wanted to be that way. So that's the argument, is more so of aggression. And so I don't know why you would argue for a regression of less rights. Like, because here's really where it's coming from, I think. The whole fucking Curtis Yarvin bullshit philosophy of like, we need a CEO run country, and like, we need this whole elitist oligarch to save you from the bad elitist oligarch. That's what the real fucking point is. And if you're falling for that, I'm sorry. Like you're being played into allowing power structures to first tell you that they tell you what you can do, that they are in control of what rights you have and don't, because it's a country, it's a company, right? And then secondarily, that you're just giving up inherent rights that you already have. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so frustrating. But again, if they came at this like, I genuinely think this is better for us, let me lay it out for you, I'm like, let's do it. I love that, right? But not like, laughing at you because you don't understand that lefts are the problem. Like, like that kind of like shallow one-sided view, which is what there's so much false certainty and righteousness in a conversation right now that's so objectively one-sided. It's hard to take seriously. but I try.
you see it play out over and over and over with the Charlie Kirk thing, where there's tons of people that are selling certainty that don't fucking know.
And the 3 fucking shootings since then, by the way. I don't know if you wanted to talk about
there were
that.
9 mass shootings over the weekend total.
Oh,
Ryan.
exactly. No. Thank you for saying that. I meant the ones that they're focusing on. Like there's the one that was North Carolina that at least I talked about, but you're right. This is what's so crazy, Steve, and I know you know this. There are almost always something shooting that happened here. And, Chicago, an example, which I do agree in that point. There's a lot of violence that we can discuss in that place. That doesn't mean martial law is the answer, but that's used to be what we would say. What about the fucking 6 kids that got killed in Chicago last night? Like, why don't we talk about that? But it's clear that it's a selective choice. But North Carolina was one I pointed out going like, okay, same point. I'm not going to say I can prove to you I know what he votes for, or if you argue he's part of one side, but it's pretty clear that he leaned to the right side of that conversation. And I think that was why people were like, that's probably why, people didn't talk about it. I only mean in the sense that like the data points would suggest a likely slant, not that we could prove one or the other. But I mean, if you want to talk about that, I think the one that we should focus on, because maybe you've seen more to it, it's a really interesting part of it, is the recent one from the Mormon church shooting.
Oh, the LDS Church in Michigan?
Yeah. Because clearly, just like with Tyler Robinson, I mean, there's even still people saying that that's not even necessarily the guy that did it, and he still has yet to confess. And yet they're out there going, we know he was a lefty, which even then you can't prove he was left or right. I get it. There are data points, but they don't prove one way or the other. There's no ideological connection. So that's just bad journalism. And then you get into the rest of them. LDS Church is one that's standing out pretty obviously, right? Where they're like the Quartering, Jones, fucking Nick Sorer, Jenny Johnson, all the usual suspects came out screaming about first an attack on Christianity. And I don't care. It's not insulting. It's not good versus bad. It's just objectively, that's not Christianity. I'm sorry that bothers people. I'm sorry that it's not a religious point either. It's a factual point. You can look at the reality that Mormons believe in most cases that you can ascend to being a god from being a human. That's a fucking completely, that's blasphemy, right? Or the idea that the Godhead point. These are just 2 of main points that I was circulating that they believe very differently than we do from the Holy Trinity. And that's as a Christian myself. And so my point is simply that that's not bad versus good. It's just not the fucking same thing. And I get it. They believe in Jesus Christ. That's not saying otherwise. It's not an insult. It's a lazy conflation for a bunch of partisans who are defending their fucking misleading partisan leaders coming out and going attack on Christianity because they didn't even fucking look. And then they were desperate to frame it as something that they, now there's the conversation of so many Republicans who support them going, oh, it's not the fucking same thing. But from that, it became lefty. We know it's a lefty. It's all the lefty. And now it's turning out that seems to not be the case. Now I'm going to go into it more today. Yesterday, I could have jumped in there and screamed all these things. The point was, you and I both, it's important for us to make sure we can verify what we're saying and not just trying to be the first one to yell the thing everyone's looking at, with a platform. That's what most of these guys do, is that you have evidence of the Trump shirt. Now, what I noticed is interesting is that you can clearly see, I think, Cat Turd shared a picture going, oh, look, you guys shared it. It was AI altered. And he shows a picture of the guy without the thing, except pretty sure the FBI has an archived version of something they took off his profile that does show the shirt. Now, is the FBI capable of lying about that? Fucking absolutely. Can we prove that? That's the point. But then you can go on to all the other things, the Trump sign in his yard that happens to be stuck behind a stop sign, which they then pretend means stop Trump, or the hunting and the Republican stuff and his family's all MAGA. Okay. The point is, I would still argue that we can't definitively prove. Trump shirt, fine. Maybe he just liked Trump but doesn't believe he's Republican. Like, let's be honest about this. And so at the point, though, if you're going to be fair, the vast majority of the kind of token maybe points they used about Robinson are screaming toward the right. But now they're all just going, it was a fake. They put the flags on his truck to make you think it was a lefty. Is that possible? Abso-fucking-lutely. Can you prove that? No. I'm just so tired of this game of like the people like us, and I think this is the majority today, are like, let's just be rational about this. Let's wait for them. And those guys will scream over the top, Trump and everybody else leading the charge, and come out and yell about all the things that they don't know for sure because they want it to be. And now they're trying to drift you into some new conversation because this one's is uncomfortably leading the wrong direction. What do you think about it all?
I think you're absolutely correct. And also, good morning, Memory Hold. Would still like to have you on the show at some point. We've connected a couple of times. I don't think it ever worked out, but by all means, please come through. We're in an era where your imagination really does determine reality, and the extent to which you can manifest your imagination onto a 2-dimensional screen through all of the different tools available, if repeated enough, does in fact become somebody's reality. So if you convince the loudest 2 or 3% of any ideological base that your imagined reality is in fact true, it default becomes part of their reality. Then they disseminate it, and then they convince other people that, again, without ever bothering to verify, without showing their work, without giving you a fucking link, will be like, yes, this is what truth is, and truth lives here, and that kind of shit. If it's branded properly, you can sell people on any manner of nonsense.
Right.
And I think we're entering, the part of the post-truth era that we live in, to where it's now you're combating falsehoods with your own creative AI-driven whatever falsehoods. It's
right, like it's a false construct, and it's
it's like lie versus lie, and somewhere in between, anybody who's not bought into one side or the other has to use their own discernment and their own research skills and available tools in order to find a grain of truth in an entire mountain of bullshit.
Right. And that's it's interesting. The thought. So think about what you just laid out there is that, so we already exist in a false two-party illusion, right? Where it's a false construct of, really one thing being split. So we pretend we're fighting when it's really a control structure, right? All they've done is, so as we are, this is what I keep talking about. As I think very rapidly, average people are starting to see beyond that for whatever reason. October 7th forward, whatever you think shifted people's minds, people are like, okay, this is fucking bullshit, right? This doesn't make sense. Everyone's lying. Epstein files, come on, fucking COVID-19 on the left, everyone's lying to us. And so what they seem to have done is created a false construct within that false construct, right? Now you've got the lie and a lie. So you got the lies within it. It's kind of the same thing, but it's an extreme extension of it, to where you're now not just that you have a different side, but you're constructing a lie within that side and a lie on this side, and as if you are proving the endpoint. And so it's almost like it's the same point, but it's like an extreme, like, to me, it's desperation. It's a very, very, very easily provable part of it, but they just are hoping you just go emotional dive into it and start screaming after the narrative. I mean, here's an extension of it that's even crazier. Did you see what Loomer and all these other extremely vile people online, they were like immediately Mormons, fucking Muslims, hating Jews, going after Christians. Oh, wait, it was a Mormon church. Oh, wait, did I say Mormons? I meant, did I say Mormons? I meant Muslims. That was just because, the first letter. Muslims going after Jews. And we're like, oh, except, and Christianity, except it was an attack on a Mormon church, except it wasn't Muslims at all, except it turns out to be a white guy, probably Republican, but didn't stop her from just constructing this entire vomiting nonsense over the entire conversation. When you look at every post she's making, fucking 10 million views, and the whole chat's full of people going, yeah, Muslims are the worst, everybody fucking shouldn't be in Congress. It's just absolutely vile. And on top of that, making all these cases about certain locations, whatever you think about people, whatever you think about their religion, that somehow because they're Muslim, because they have a certain religion, that therefore they are terrorists. They are a problem. They're overtaking this country. I'm all about going after people you think are breaking the law. If you think somebody is doing something illegally, then fucking make a case, charge them for it, present your evidence. The idea that we're trying to argue that, look here, I made this example yesterday. Do I think day before yesterday, do I think Laura Loomer, and this is completely my opinion, do I think she's acting on behalf of a foreign country? I literally think that. I think that whether she knows that or not, and I kind of think she does, I think what her work is being done for the interest of something other than this country. So, should I argue that she shouldn't have a right to free speech? No. Will I defend her right to say those things that I think she's using? Yes. Do I think she's using free speech manipulatively to be able to achieve that? I do. Will I still defend her right to? Yes, I would. So the same argument, if you think people are like, Muslims are secretly trying to overtake, okay, possibly. Prove that, first of all. Secondarily, if you think that's the case, if they're not breaking the law, if they're acting within their rights, then what are we talking about? The moment that there's, and like, I can understand the point that maybe they're doing something, building there. Do you know what that is? Elizabeth Newman, that we talked about before. I see it building. I just don't know how to stop it. What was their argument? Well, the right, by the way, was building terrorist activity, but they were acting just underneath. They're acting within their constitutional rights, and we can't do anything about it. So what was the core argument? Remove those rights to be able to go after them. What do you think fucking Trump is doing right now? Of course, we can pretend it's only about the left, but you have to understand that. And all of it comes down to principle. You can make a fucking logical argument for why you might need to ignore those rights. You know, there's a secret, dangerous network building trying to attack, so we have to do it before they can. That maybe even be right. But if you can't prove that, that's where we start. But the reality is, if we can't err on the side of principle today, the government will always use, make, construct, lie about things just like that in order to get us to call for the removal of those rights. It happens every fucking day, and you and I have been covering this forever.
You're absolutely correct. And when you were talking about the talking point where it's okay, well, it's just the Muslims doing all of this. Immediately in my head, I heard my favorite TV mom of all time, Roseanne Barr, give the exact same argument as to this. She's done it multiple times. This is a different clip than the one that I've played a couple of times.
She's so utterly lost in her partisan beliefs. It's upsetting.
And what sucks is that childhood me hates adult me for criticizing her. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like you were my favorite TV family. I identified with the Connors very strongly.
Right.
Let me run this real quick.
Well, all of the Qatari propaganda is in fact Muslim Brotherhood propaganda.
Absolutely.
And Hitler founded the Muslim Brotherhood with the Mufti of Jerusalem. So that just explains it. That's what they won't let be said. And I think that's why I lost my job, because I said Muslim Brotherhood.
I think so
Because
too.
that is the veil over America.
Well, I always say this: you can talk about Jews and Zionists all day long. Go on Instagram, Jews, Joos. How many people call out Muslim Brotherhood? People are afraid. Dude.
Oh my God!
The old saying is, if you ever want to know who controls you, think about who you can make fun of.
Holy shit!
Right. You can talk about Jews all day long.
Right. No, hang on. Let's because we still have another 15 seconds of this madness, and what her kid is saying is important too. But yeah, let's dissect that.
Why don't you finish it though? This is 15 seconds. Just finish it, and then we'll talk.
Okay. It's crazy talk.
You can't comment on. You can talk about Jews all day long. Nobody talks about.
So
Muslim
I
Brotherhood.
say,
she did
just
once and lost her
substitute
show.
the word Jew.
Who's in charge?
Just substitute when you hear people talking about the Jews. Substitute those two words that I said.
Muslim
Yeah.
I mean, what the fuck, man? Like, look, can anybody honest argue that the Muslim Brotherhood is not something that we scrutinize them just like fucking anybody. There's all sorts of very, very problematic influences like we can point anywhere. But the idea that you're going to actually invert the reality and argue that, like, look at the people, all these people like her, Loomer, and the people that are like, these are some of the most prominent voices in that side of the conversation they can't put out a tweet about fucking the sunshine without, with an average benign thing without inserting some point about Muslims. It's happening every single thing they say. And for arguing that anybody anywhere is censoring that. Now, look, you know what that comes from? It comes from the left and the idea of hate speech, and you're radical, and okay, well, that's what the right's doing right now in the exact same way about anti-Semitism and about Jews and whatever. Okay. But the left is not doing that right now. You know why? Because the left's not in fucking charge. I mean, sure, you could point to, I don't know what, like maybe somebody in a position of authority in a school, within a classroom. Like, you want to show me some large scale active, the Israeli government, the US government, and the UK government and places around the world are in this massive effort to suppress speech and completely control that side of the conversation. And you think they don't know that? Like, that takes a special kind of willful ignorance. So they are either lying or they are so dumb they can barely tie their shoes. I mean, I don't really know how you can look at that otherwise. I think Roseanne probably falls in the latter if you really want to break it down, that she doesn't understand why she can't see that. But because you look at her talk, I mean, I'm not trying to, I mean, it's just, I'm being objectively, this is what I see. That's not trying to be insulting. I don't have a high opinion of her, but if you watch her talk, she's not very bright, guys. She doesn't really understand the in-depth point that she's trying to make. She's repeating things that she reads on places like Laura Loomer. That's what I think anyway. Either way, she's wrong. It's kind of sad when you look at that. Now, I mean, there are people that would argue that and probably effort to do that in some positions, or let's just say the Biden administration was currently in power. They might be doing something in a broader way that overlaps with, like, you're not allowed to insult people of color and, censor you. My point is, I can say you're disgusting for doing anything, but you have a right to insult and do whatever you want. That's in regard to speech. But the problem is, what was the left doing as well? And more than any of that, censoring around Israel, censoring around anti-Semitism. I mean, you show me in this country the last bill about that actually went into law about it, which is unconstitutional, about censoring around hate for Muslims. I don't say, where's that? I can see fucking anti-Semitism bills every single administration as far back as I can look left and right. It doesn't take much to break down how dumb that is. It's very frustrating. And they are reaching billions of people. It's crazy.
Yeah, and not only are they reaching billions of people, but they're in a position of influence and respect that they got through imaginary means.
Right.
Like, it's not even anything that they did to deserve that position, because they were putting out insights that were, brain breaking or paradigm shifting or anything like that. They repeated the right talking points enough and had already had a place in people's hearts or minds or whatever. And
I want Roseanne on my show to say the thing.
Yeah. And it's almost like a predatory response to it. And so they're looking at the influence they have, the influence the algorithm is going to give them, because Elon Musk is definitely going to promote, oh, well, hey, if it's the Muslim Brotherhood or if it's Qatar, then that takes heat off of me and my influence and relationship with Benjamin Milikowski and Israel and all this kind of stuff. So, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood has undue influence in the United States, said literally nobody paying attention or keeping track of the money. But in order to combat the undue influence that the Muslim Brotherhood and the Qataris have on American politics, Ryan, we're going to give TikTok to Larry Ellison and the IDF. You're muted, brother.
Yeah, I was saying, right. But what's interesting is that, you could like from their perspective, the way they would bend that to make sense is that that's them fighting back against the problem that they see. Like we're evening the table, even though you can look objectively and see that that's exactly, again, I don't see anybody censoring around that conversation. Am I wrong? I mean, I may be wrong. I'm sure there's probably somewhere where that's happening, but can somebody show me something where people are going Muslims bad and being censored on platforms? Show me. It doesn't fucking exist. And I think that's just, how can you make these points? It's just crazy to me. There's a lot there. The point about all this is that you can nobody should be, it's about principles always. It's not about, if people are out there and you think they're breaking the law, then make your case and fucking charge them with the crime or go through the process. But all of this always comes down to, and this is pretty much everything we're seeing.
Yeah.
You making an argument about a problem, and then saying that there's, it's a secret problem. We can't necessarily prove it to you, but we need the government. You see, the government has to come in and broaden out its construct of what is a legal problem and then apply that in a broad way. Not to the one guy who broke the window, but the entire group who's standing next to him, because they're all secretly terrorists. If we can't see the same thing that happened to the right when they were wearing fucking red hats when Biden was there, it does make the same point every time. You're all fucking terrorists because of this one thing. It's just the same lazy, unintelligent argument, and it's everywhere you look. And people like this half the time don't even know that they're so absorbed in their own perception of what they think the problems are, and they're partisan screaming, and the people they listen to who tell them the exact same things, and to your point, will go, oh, she said the thing that I'm yelling, let's get Roseanne on to repeat the thing so we can keep this cycle of bullshit going, and then Elon will share it, and then it's the same kind of thing, and that doesn't make it fucking true, but it's frustrating. It's all very clear. And this is, I do believe that most people out there aren't stupid enough. They may fall into this from time to time, but if they care to look, you can objectively prove this stuff for yourself.
Easily, without even doing too much heavy lifting. Yeah. It's just, and that's what kills me. You don't even have to break a sweat doing this. You don't have to really even flex your brain muscles that hard. You just have to look beyond the surface, scratch below it a little tiny bit, and it's open and available to you.
And this is,
go ahead.
Well, are you going to switch topics?
Well, I was going to segue into some music that is related to both of the topics that we're talking about, but I was also going to give you the option of choosing the track.
Okay. Oh, fuck. What was I going to say then? Oh, well, the point, the larger point, just then we can do that, is just that this is what I'm seeing in all of the conversation from any of these sides right now. Everything, everywhere you look, right? They're trying to convince you. And this point I was making earlier is to, most people, like, there's people out there that don't care, don't have principles, right? They just want to dunk on the people they don't like. But I'd argue most people out there, and yes, in the chat I see you give them too much credit. Maybe, but what's the harm in wanting to see the best in people? And I really do believe that, by the way. I think there's evidence of that. But if you're not sure, let's give them, let's give humanity the benefit of the doubt. What's the, probably not just what's the harm in it. I think that's in our interest, right? To fucking maybe assume that humanity can fucking survive if we actually care. But my point, though, is that right now and everywhere you look, right, you can see the government creating this construct where, so most people, I think my point was, have principle and understand, like look, most Republicans, I think, care about the Constitution. I mean, otherwise, why is that being a tool they use to manipulate them? You believe, but they're just convincing you that there's a reason why you should ignore it right now. The principle of it all. And it's the same thing everywhere. If they're like what it is about immigration or violent lefties or whatever, it's the same argument they made about you guys. And all they're trying to do is get you to justify the government being able to broaden out its defined legal reality, right? I mean, so it's like, why would you want that? Just because you think they're on your side, that Trump and Hegseth and Bondi, and that they're just like fighting for you only? Well, maybe, but at some point that's going to flip around. And so they're trying to get you to rationalize giving them the power to be like, okay, well, this guy committed a crime, but we're going to say that this explains why we can just go after anybody that has the same shirt on, or this, whatever it is. And I just need you guys to think about that. Why would you want that government to have that power, or any government, or any power structure? Charge the person with a crime and let them prove their case. And like, this is the thing. I'm not trying to say that the FBI or anybody else, which I have very clearly negative opinions about, but the way that with the current reality, I'm not saying, because I also point out I don't think everyone's evil in every position. I think there's people in there that believe they're doing good in some cases, but I'm not saying they can't investigate. If you think somebody's secretly, like if you think these Muslims are planning a secret underground network, then investigate them. Right? Don't break the law. People have constitutional rights, but investigate and go out there and ask questions if you think they can say no. The point is, do your job and prove it. Make a fucking case about why you think there's a network and what they plan to do, and then bring that case to something that might be actionable. And if there's no crime being committed, then it's not actionable. But then you can surveil and you can watch. And my point is, I argue there's always a line to cross, and it comes down to your constitutional rights, period. And if they can, and this is what the whole point was. It was created because it was meant to be a restriction on authority, not you. And we've inverted that. And so that's the point, is that we want that line there where they go, well, I could spy on them and maybe find out, but that's their right. So I'm going to try to do my job within that realm. And guess what? People have been doing that our entire existence. And people have been breaking it our entire existence, but that's the battle, right? Yeah. Sorry. I mean, I have a broken record about this, but I think we must know how important this is right now.
I really fucking hope so, man, because I can't think of a time in my life where it was more front and centered and more critical. I really can't.
Right.
And this is one of those times where if you don't stand up for it, the reality is there are people in positions of real and perceived authority who are working tirelessly to take that away from you.
Yep.
Before we bring Dontel in, I do want to roll. I was going to give you the choice, Ryan, because every time we talk about this stuff, everybody in the chat is screaming about our friend of the show, Crack Amico, and his musical stylings. So I was going to give you the option of the Dave Portnoy "Don't Talk About Jews" song, which I think we've all heard, or he has a new John out that is about all of the comics that are taking Saudi head chopper money to perform currently at the Riyadh Comedy Festival.
That's funny. I haven't seen that. Let's watch that.
Okay, we'll cue that one up then.
And we should add, though, what's interesting is that, like, to the point, there are Saudi, like that's like, it's not all ever one thing, right? It's not just Israel or just the Muslim Brotherhood, but you can argue that any of these groups are actively out there in some ways, not everybody everywhere, but group like Saudi Arabia, without question, is an authoritarian fucking dictatorship, essentially. A little bit nuanced to that, but it's not fucking democracy or whatever they claim they're fighting for. So recognize that they are doing that, but you can easily prove that Saudi Arabia is acting in the interest. It's basically a vassal state for the U.S. and Israel, if you understand its creation and what it's always done. But so that, think of it that way. Same with Qatar, by the way. I don't know why we can't be obvious about how Qatar's been used. It's not like it's, it's debatable whether it's completely co-opted. I think you can make a case about that, but that it's been used as a fucking go around for Israel, and U.S. do the same policy for many. It's like funding Hamas, for example. So this game where they go, it's Qatari funded. I'm like, well, take one more fucking step.
How the money get to Qatar, Bibby? How'd it get there?
Yeah, exactly.
Who's carrying the freaking bags?
Hey,
What,
Mossad,
dude?
go give Qatar money. Go give to our people. Like, it's exactly what they did with Hamas. So let's just understand that.
Are you familiar at all with the Riyadh Comedy Festival and what's going on with that? And Dontel, I swear to God, dude, I'm gonna bring you up in like 3 minutes after we play a shot. I'm not trying to keep you backstage. This isn't Opie and Anthony. We're not gonna make you wait in the fucking hallway for an hour and a half.
Bring him in.
Okay, well, we'll bring you up, and then we'll all sit back and watch watch the video. But it is fantastic to see you, my brother. How you doing, Dontel?
I'm great. Like always, it's great to be with you guys. Always going to be a good time. I'm here for the ride.
It's always a blast to have you on, and I'm very glad you're back. Let's take a short music break here, because this thing is mind-boggling to me. The government of Saudi Arabia is handing out massive amounts of oil money to have sellout comedians come and do very sanitized versions of their act in order to be like, we're capable of laughter in Saudi Arabia.
Right. Are there women comics going?
There are a couple, and they're going to be highlighted in this particular. I hope so. I do.
Because think of the contradiction right there of everyone screaming about Iran, which, by the way, is not even close to what they claim. There's women that wander all over the place without hijabs on, but on other side of it, you have Orthodox Jews in Israel who are fucking required to wear head coverings. We don't talk about that, but the idea that they would go there and do that in Saudi, and we'd all promote it as some kind of remember the whole game they're playing about how Saudis were women's freedom was becoming a thing. It's
they can drive now.
Not even fucking real, not really.
No, we let them get behind the wheel. We're liberated.
Right.
It's
right.
But again, shout out to friend of the show, Crack Amico, and shout out to one of the producers of the show, Kent Woods, who creates beats for Crack Amico. I found out recently that there's like really cool overlap between these two worlds. And one of the people that's consistently in the chat and has helped produce the show and stuff like that makes beats for this dude.
Nice.
So it's a coming together of all of it. But yeah, here we go.
Yo, it's Billy Burka. Yo, we get Riyadh money, baby. It's brutal.
Halla shiki Luigi Mando. Hey, it Luigi Mando.
Yo,
we getting Riyadh money.
Yeah.
We getting Riyadh money. I am a cook, I got a shitty black and white.
Yeah.
I am a cook, I got a shitty black and white.
It's brutal.
We getting Riyadh money.
Yo,
we getting Riyadh money.
Now that Riyadh money got them selling their souls. If they wasn't telling jokes, they be selling they hoes. They do anything for dollars, even say a prayer to Allah. Balaclavas on their faces just to pack out a show. Whoa, Chris Stefano, I had to let you know this festival might rest your soul. They colder than the Eskimos. The episodes you drop must not be making no sense. Mr. Ross only going cause there's no age of consent.
Jeez.
Guess the roast master general demoted to lieutenant. I'm the lord of this land, I'm evicting these lieutenants. Who didn't expect Tommy Buns to take the Saudi funds? Probably for a Rolex, he don't give the kids a mommy none.
No.
Aziz needs this, I'm rooting for him in the end. Cause how could you get canceled for being a horny Indian?
Wow.
I can't believe what I'm seeing is Pete Davidson. Made a lot of money, but I guess he ain't been saving none.
Hey.
Never forget, well I guess he forgot. Now he performing for the animals that took out his pops.
Yo.
Does he even know?
Does he
And
know?
shit, probably got bad friends like Sadi Santino and Hammurabi Lee. Pulled that little penis out on stage where he gonna be a goner first time out the country.
What?
Unless we count in Tijuana.
Bro,
I wonder why they canceled on Tim Dillon.
Wow.
Probably cause they heard about the men that he been drilling. Not ratting, I'm chin chilling. But what about Miss Whitney?
Wow.
Voice for strong women? Bitch, you gotta be shitting me. I remember you vividly, Simon D'Elia wickedly. You headed to a place where they treating women maliciously, beating the bitches viciously, physically dominating hoes. Silver lining, we can't see her body when it's draped in robes.
True.
She gon' fit right in with the ancient ruins.
Old lady.
Hey Sebastian, what are you doing? They go for payroll, do whatever you say so. Kirsten, haven't you seen what they do to gay hoes? Squeeze you like your Play-Doh. On God, they'll murk you. Or maybe they invited you to make you wear a burqa. Mark and Sam, they might be drunk. And if they say the wrong thing, they might be sliced and chunked inside the trunk of a fucking Cybertruck. Now this just don't seem worth a little subscriber bump. Chappelle turned down millions and went to Africa. Now we headed back just to hack for some human traffickers. Louis, please, you're selling your soap, brother. Used to think you was the GOAT, now you hanging with goat fuckers. How the fuck could Kev possibly need any more cheese? Another divorce? Geez, stop fucking these whores, please. Saudi see this little midget, they'll chase him like Voorhees. When machetes hook you ready to drop to your knees. Oh, Billy Bird, a Beantown hypocrite. I'll admit when you was dissing mustard, I ain't give a shit. But now you headed to a place they pay your wife to feel her hair. Hates white billionaires, loves brown trillionaires. You cringe ginger, screaming out free Luigi. Sucking so much Saudi dick that you gon' need a squeegee for the cleaning of the semen and demons from rubbing genies. Your opinion means nothing, shut your mouth, fucking weenie. Jeez. I know it's people that sharing the same feelings. What a shame, all these lames with these hijacking plain villains. Shout out to Shane Gillis, a true American patriot. Declined the Saudi offer cause he knew that shit would make him sick. For the rest of y'all, enjoy your little festival. I really hope that they don't chop off all your breast and balls. Sorry guys, just being a broke hater. I'll just say congratulations and welcome to Al Qaeda.
Yo.
I love that. I love that.
Except the part about Saudi Arabia 9/11.
I mean, and I actually, so when Crack Amico was on the show and 9/11 came up, I made him watch Corbett's 5-minute presentation, and he was like, "Oh, well, damn, that was."
To be fair, though, there's points to be made. It's just understanding the nuance of Saudi Arabia in any conversation, right? Because it's easy to say Saudi Arabia attacked us because 8 of 11 or whatever it's just not the real like we said in the beginning. There's much more to understand about how that's operated, especially to understand how it's like I mean, you can look. I forget the exact term, but you can look up that Mossad has a literal name for using Arabs to present as their, intelligence operations.
Yeah,
Palestinian is very common. Go ahead.
My point on my perspective on Saudi Arabia's involvement in 9/11 has always been okay, not that to put the blame on them, but that it was just completely ridiculous that we're going to invade Iraq and Afghanistan and say that was because they attacked us in 9/11 when just technically the hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. So that's really where I put Saudi Arabia in this, because they're most likely acting on behalf of whoever in the U.S.
Yeah.
But even funnier, though, is the Iraq part. So you're right. First of all, it's okay, well, then if we're pretending that Saudi Arabia is responsible, why would it be any other country? But then secondarily, why fucking Iraq? Which is even the point, because we're talking about Afghanistan and Osama bin Laden, because it wasn't about any of that, right? It was so clumsy. And that was one of the first things people pointed out. It's what the fuck does Iraq have to do with any of this? It's just because that was the point. That was the objective. You can talk to, going back to Zbigniew Brzezinski's plan for the balkanization of the Middle East. It's this has been planned for a long time. And so Bush was just execution, but that's what's so crazy about it is they didn't even fucking blink. You know what I mean? It's might as well just invade fucking Britain. It's what does that have to do with anything? Just pick, obviously that's not the agenda they're aiming for, but the point's the same. It's it doesn't make any sense. But the point, what actually the worst point is? Because Americans won't know the difference. That's what they would argue, probably, because Muslim country, they won't know. And sadly, that did seem to win the day.
Your neck of the woods there, Tease. And this may not affect you much, but it does affect several million of your countrymen. Canada is taking the guns away.
Voluntary. How is this? You say that the program is voluntary, but after the amnesty ends, the people are not in compliance with the law. So how is this truly voluntary?
So Canadians starting in Cape Breton today will be able to enroll in the program, be able to get compensated if they were to turn their firearm in, or they will be able to get compensation if they deactivate and confirm that it's deactivated with a certificate. So it is strictly voluntary. Nobody is being forced to undertake the buyback program. Well, the expectation is that they will comply, and the order in council, as you know, is being extended from this October to October of 2026. So there is a 1-year window. Our expectations is that law-abiding citizens will abide by the law, and beyond that, the police of jurisdiction is tasked to, as you know, implement the criminal code.
If Canada is a rule of law, why did you offer to pay someone the difference in compensation and bail them out of jail? You're a minister. Why'd you say that?
Let's maybe put this in context. This was a private conversation with an individual that I've known for many years. I said these two issues frankly, in bad humor, that is being misinterpreted. It is very clear that there was a private conversation. It is with someone. It is an acquaintance.
We believe you.
Well,
I believe what you said on the phone.
Well, first of all, it's not the phone. It was in the context of a private conversation in person. What is important is that if you look at it in context, that was not a serious attempt. It was a bad attempt on my part. It was in no way to suggest that they will either I will bail them out or otherwise. That is not.
Why should do humor about? Is it a subject you should do humor about?
Let's look at the context of it. It was a 20-minute conversation, and as part of the conversation in a private setting, it was a range of issues that we discussed. So it is humor.
If you want to say one thing in private and one thing different in public,
was to see that this program moved along quicker, and what we have today is maybe, hopefully, 200 guns in Cape Breton. Have you not failed at the task of getting this moving faster?
Absolutely not, because we need to test the system that we have for individual gun owners. The next 5 to 7 weeks is a test period. It will enable us to go through the glitches. In fact, I did the enrollment last week as a trial run, and I came up with some suggestions to improve it. Those improvements were done. What we anticipate is feedback that we get with Cape Breton. We will be able to strengthen and make it a better program overall.
Madame Provost, juste une dernière question. Madame Provost, est-ce que...
Yeah. So the gun buyback program moving into the mandatory disarmament phase.
Yeah,
but hey, don't worry. It's just a joke.
Well, I don't know what the particular joke that he was being defensive about that probably, I don't know, wasn't funny and was likely one of those things that, like, in the context of a private rich people meeting, you know, those can be pretty savage jokes. It's like, you know, talking about people as cannon fodder and stuff, you know, it's like in a joking way, not just like seeing us that way, but that's not what it was in the context of it being recorded in the UN, whatever. But the point is that kind of thing does still happen in those settings. Also, I don't know that person. It could, and it makes me wonder about the other side of the spectrum, which is that the people who are literally actually bought into believing this shit, who actually see it as a kindness to go out there and take guns away, you know, and then they become like the dupe patsy, like sheeple front, like march of the public face of what goes out and gets this done. So I don't know which side of the spectrum is it. If it's the cackling psychopath behind closed doors, if it's someone who's out there literally believing it. But either way, yeah, you're right. It's basically just the slow trickle of tyranny in the stripping of people's armaments and in that their fundamental rights.
Yeah. Let's see. Where did you go? Oh, that's right. I did want to do this one. So we've talked a lot actually about entering into the era of the deep fake as reality.
Yeah.
And that I mean, with the available tools and the technology that you can get for free, you can create sort of convincing videos that paint people in a very good light or a very bad light. Now OpenAI, our good buddy Sam Altman, it has released a product called Sora, which will let you deep fake your friends. OpenAI has a new version of the Sora AI video generator that it launched at the end of last year. It's arriving today alongside a new social video app, also called Sora, for iPhones. The currently invite-only app resembles TikTok, with the exception that it isn't controlled by the Israeli government. I'm sorry, I misread that. With a feed of videos you can shuffle through, but instead of encouraging people to stitch together duets, it asks you to record short videos that anyone can spin into new AI-generated deepfakes, of course, with your consent. Right? Let's take a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pilato with a tap. 1, 2, 3.
All right. So if anybody wants to make a video of Tease ice skating competitively with his cat on his head, there's a way to do that now. Don't we all feel liberated, lucky, and free? I know I do.
I guess it's just like, you know, those stupid birthday cards that you used to get sent like an email, and it's a bunch of people like dancing with your face or something in the middle of it or some crap like that, and someone will send it to you on your birthday.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like that, only the AI equivalent. But like, yeah, you're right that it gets pretty sketchy once you apply it to, oh yeah, by the way, you can just like do this with people, and we're gonna live in a stasis of God knows what the fuck reality is anymore, as the machine gradually consumes us and then farts out whatever version of humanity it's trying to cook in the back end. Yeah, fun stuff.
I was born in the G code embedded in my blood. We don't talk to parties, we don't make a peace bond. We ain't trusting in the judicial system, we shoot guns. We rely on the streets, we do battle in the hood. I was born in the G code embedded in my blood.